Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto was abandoned and survived because of Kyuubi instincts part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Sasuke growled as he jumped to the next tree branch. Damn cat, he muttered. This was the 6th time this week he and his team had been sent out to retrieve the damn cat. His eyes searched the woods and then glanced behind him at the setting sun. He knew the cat couldn't be out this far, he was miles away from Konoha, but he was enjoying the excuse to just search the woods. And the cat went away farther every time he ran. A flash of movement in the forest caught his attention, and he smirked. Found you, he whispered as he set off to intercept the stupid cat. He darted between the branches and fell towards the forest floor, landing perfectly in an easy crouch. Reaching out, he grabbed at the cat, but was surprised to watch as his cat grew in size and back flipped out his reach. What the hell? He muttered as the creature took off once more. He growled and took off after it. There was no way he was going to let whatever it was get away. He took to the trees again and followed the streak of movement closely, surprised by its speed. What the hell is that thing? He watched as the creature ran towards its home and smirked. There was no way out of the small cave. He landed quietly and began walking towards the cave. But he was caught off guard as the creature attacked him seconds after he stepped inside the little cave. He just missed being scarred by those sharp nails and was surprised to hear a guttural growl come from the creature and a glint of light off his eyes. Sasuke removed a couple shuriken from his holster and watched for the creature again. He just barely caught the movement from his right and immediately brought his leg out, connecting with the creature's head. A soft, surprised shriek followed with the creature's body falling to the ground. Sasuke frowned. He hadn't expected to take the creature down that easily even if his foot did completely connect with its head. He carefully approached the fallen creature and nudged it with his foot before dragging it out of the cave to look at it in the falling light. It's a, he whispered as he stared at the young unconscious boy at his feet. Naked, dirty and disheveled, but very obviously a boy. Sasuke knelt down and carefully checked for a pulse, his nose wrinkling at the pungent odor rising off his body. Stale, red blood could be seen on his lips and at the corners of his mouth, and his skin was covered in mud and excrement. His long, matted hair was covered in the same things, but Sasuke caught glimpses of blonde underneath the mud. He knelt down and found a pulse, continuing to stare at the boy. He couldn't understand why a boy would be out here in the first place, let alone covered in extremities, mud and blood. Quickly deciding it best to take the boy with him, he removed his jacket and wrapped him in it before picking him up. He tried to ignore the smell and began his journey back towards his team. He shifted the blonde boy in his arms and was surprised to see just how light he was. Then he remembered his ribs and how they had shown. The boy looked as if he hadn't eaten in days or weeks. A weak whimper came from the boy's lips and Sasuke tightened his grip on him. He knew that he should take the boy in just in case he was an enemy or missing Nin, but just looking at the mess he carried told him this boy was either. He walked slowly out of the woods to where his team were, still carrying the blonde boy, and sighed. Kakashi and Sakura were standing there with the damn cat, just waiting for him. Sakura squealed and showed him the cat, yelling something about how she found him all on her own and captured the damnable thing. Kakashi frowned at the form in Sasuke's arms and told Sakura to stay back as he came to examine the find. What's that? He asked once he was close enough. Sasuke shuffled his load and pulled his jacket down some. Found him in the woods. Don't know who he is, he said stiffly. The one-eyed ninja looked down and studied the sight before him, taking in everything he saw. The Jounin instructor let out a small gasp and muttered something that Sasuke couldn't catch. He then looked back up at him, his headband covering his one eye. Where exactly did you find him? He demanded. Near a cave, a couple miles south of here. Sasuke answered, not showing his curiosity at Kakashi's behavior. The usually laid-back and perverted teacher had suddenly turned serious and businesslike. It's impossible, he muttered and shook his head. He looked at Sasuke again. Give him to me. We need to take him to Hokage-sama before he awakens. You and Sakura take back that cat, Kakashi ordered, and taking the blonde boy in his arms took off across the rooftops towards the Hokage's office. The two Anbu posted outside of his door looked curiously at him, but let him pass, opening the doors for him. Kakashi? Hokage asked from over his desk, staring at the silver-haired Jounin. What is it? I think you need to look at this boy. Sasuke found him. He placed the boy on the couch and stood back as the old Hokage slowly assessed the prone figure. It's impossible, the old man whispered. Uzumaki Naruto? Hi. Blonde hair, he said. Point to the tufts of blonde not covered in mud, elongated canines. You can see the 3 whisker marks on each cheek, and just looking at him shows he's been living on his own, Kakashi answered. He's been missing for 8 years. How could he possibly have survived? Hokage murmured aloud and touched the boy's cheek gingerly, wiping a bit of mud off his cheek. He'd be needing new furniture now, but if this was truly Naruto, it was worth it. Blue eyes snapped open at the touch and stared up at the two people hovering over him. He immediately lashed out and scrambled off the couch, dropping into a well-protected crouch. One lip quivered, bearing a canine, as his eyes stayed focused on the two men. I think we have our answer. Kyuubi's instincts must have taken over, Kakashi whispered, watching the blonde back up and take in his surroundings. The real question is, has Kyuubi taken over? Hi. The blonde boy carefully stood up and began pacing the room, looking for the way out while also watching every move the two creatures made. Circling around, he concluded that the small opening to his left was the only way in or out of the den. He approached the opening, still watching the two, and froze once he reached the window, his eyes growing large. There were so many dens and he could see small creatures crawling around on the ground between the stone caves. He gave the air a hesitant sniff and wrinkled his nose at the disdainful scent of pollution in the air. Naruto? The Hokage asked, but the blonde ignored him. Slowly, he walked towards the young boy and reached a hand out, but quickly retracted it when Naruto's reflexes suddenly struck out at him, swiping at his chest with his claws. He growled and jumped onto the edge of the entrance, still watching the two men. He glanced outside and then at them before disappearing out of the room. Sandaime rushed to the window and looked out, seeing the blonde boy land deftly on his feet and disappear into the city. Retrieve him now! He ordered and watched as Sixambu took off after the quick blonde who had just slipped out the window. The old Hokage sighed and sat down on the chair behind his desk. So he's alive. Hi Hokage-sama, Kakashi said, crossing his arms. The son of the fourth lost to us 8 years ago is being returned, but he doesn't seem to recognize anything, not even us. He's been alone for 8 years, we don't even know if he's sane, he whispered as he looked out the window. I assume we'll have to speak with Sasuke, he's the one who found him. Kakashi sighed, just more work for him. We will have to, but first we have to apprehend Naruto again. Run! Naruto's mind screamed, dodging between the pathways and strange creatures all around him. He was scared, outnumbered, and he couldn't smell right here. There was something in the air that was throwing off his sense of smell. These creatures looked like him, they had hands like him, walked on 2 legs like him, and there were hundreds of them, but they spoke a weird language he couldn't understand and their bodies differed. The first one he had seen had a body of blue and white, and its skin seemed to be falling off. The second and third one he had seen had also differed. The silver one's body was black and gray and he only had one eye, a deformity covered where his other eye should have been, and the other creature had many loose layers of skin in bright yellow, and even its face was loose. He had to get away, there were so many of them, everywhere he turned one of those creatures was there, and there were so many dens he was lost. He yelled as 6 black figures dropped out of the sky around him, driving him left into a small path between dens. He spit at them, growling, his lip quivering in a snarl, and watched their every move, claws ready to attack. He glanced behind him and saw he was getting backed into a corner. He growled deep in his throat before jumping to the left, his nails gripping into the brick wall, and launching at the next wall. He quickly climbed up the den walls and clambered onto the roof, taking off across them with the speed and grace of a fox, sliding and jumping his way across. Yet the black creatures were just behind him and quickly catching up. He growled in annoyance and slid off the rooftop, dropping on all fours to the ground below. Creatures gasped and moved away from him quickly. He growled and ran through the crowd of creatures blindly, clawing and spitting at anyone who was in his way. He sniffed the air, wrinkling his nose at the scent of fire, and tried to move away from the fire. Fire was bad, it hurt. Burned. Naruto froze. He spun around, sniffing the air, but the smoke smell was heavy in the air and all around him. He began to panic and darted off blindly down another pathway, hiding in the corner behind some crates and watching as the black creatures came closer to him. One grabbed him and began saying something to him, but he couldn't understand and clawed at the creature to let him go. The creature shouted and dropped him when his claws connected with his arm, and Naruto didn't waste the chance to dart between the black creatures and back into the street, yet he skidded to a halt as he looked up into the black eyes of the first creature. Sasuke huffed. The naked blonde boy hadn't left his thoughts for a second since he had handed him over to Kakashi. His sensei had just acted too differently for him to dismiss it as he usually would have, and he wanted to know what was going on with the blonde boy. After returning the cat to his owner with Sakura, he immediately left, not even answering Sakura's pleas to go out to lunch with her. He wandered around aimlessly for a while before arriving in town, knowing he was heading towards the Hokage to ask him what became of the blonde boy. Regardless of him being 12, he was the head of the Uchiha clan, and that gave him special privileges, such as requesting an unscheduled meeting with the Hokage. A squeak coming from his left alerted him to the approaching figure, and he turned to see muddy blonde hair, whisker marks, and vibrant blue eyes skidding to a halt before him. He stared down at the same naked boy he had just been thinking about, frowning. Wasn't he supposed to be with Hokage-sama? He saw the quickly approaching Umbu and reacted before the blonde snapped out of his shock, grabbing him around the waist and holding his back against his chest. The boy snarled angrily and tore at his arms, kicking out with his feet, but Sasuke refused to drop the struggling boy, holding him until an Umbu was able to place a sleep jutsu on him. Sasuke watched as the blonde's body fell limp in his arms and quickly knelt down so he could pick him back up properly this time. "If you don't mind, I'll take him back," Sasuke said to the Umbu. "I have business with the Hokage anyway." The six looked at each other once before the hawk-masked ninja nodded. "You may take him." Together with the six Umbu, Sasuke entered the Hokage's office and looked at his sensei, and then the third Hokage. Bowing to the Hokage, he tilted his head as to where to put the boy and then placed him on the couch at the Sandame's gesture. Kakashi quirked an eyebrow at his young student, his eye crinkling with amusement as he said, "You found him again, Sasuke?" He narrowed his eyes at the teasing tone in his sensei's voice. "The dobe almost ran into me, I stopped him." "He's quite fast, Hokage-sama, he'd make a great messenger," one of the Umbu said. "He had us running, that's for certain." Sandame gave a small smile and approached the sleeping blonde, looking down at him with a mixture of awe and happiness. "Welcome home, Uzumaki Naruto." "Danger." Naruto opened his eyes and slowly sat up. He froze. The odd creatures hadn't been a dream. He thought these creatures were always dreams, but this time they were not. He brought his legs underneath him and crouched low, watching every one of them. His eyes focused on the hole in the wall that he had jumped out earlier, and then back to the creatures. Blue eyes scanned over all of them. There were more of them this time, and finally stopped on the dark-haired one. Slowly standing up, Naruto approached the pale creature and stared closely at him, trying to understand it. He peered into the black eyes and sniffed at him, surprised he had the same smell as himself yet different. He growled at the creature, but it didn't respond. He reached out, carefully touching its face, and trailed a claw down his cheek before doing the same to his own. He didn't like this creature, whatever it was, and suddenly lashed out at it. Yet the creature was quicker than it seemed and jumped out of the way of his claws. He snarled and leapt after it, slashing and kicking at it, but the creature kept avoiding him. Suddenly the creature lashed out at him with some kind of metal claw. Naruto snarled and leapt backwards, landing on all fours and staring up at the creature. He growled and spit at the creature, but it did no good. Naruto glanced at the other creatures and dashed for the entrance once again, but let out a pain-filled yell when someone grabbed his hair and pulled him away from it. Gritting his teeth, he dug his feet into the floor and pulled forward as fast as he could to break out of the creature's grip, but when he turned to the entrance again, he found one of the black creatures blocking it. Snarling, he whirled around and stalked for another entrance, even though he already knew there was none, but all fox dens had a secret entrance. No fox would only have one. Yet he found none, and so he turned his attention back to the black creature standing before the entrance and growled deeply. Yet before he could even move towards the creature, another grabbed him by the shoulder and kneed him in the stomach, causing him to yelp and fall to his knees. The yellow creature shouted angrily and tried to approach him, but Naruto immediately jumped away, his lips quivering in a snarl. What did these creatures want? Why were they keeping him here? He yelled and crept back onto the couch, staring at the creatures around him. He didn't like this. He didn't want to be here. He wanted to back to his forest. He needed to hunt and find shelter for the night. Everyone watched as the blonde-haired boy slowly woke up, wondering what he would do once the sleeping jutsu was removed. Blue eyes snapped open and looked around the room warily before finally settling on Sasuke. The naked boy stood up and approached him, staring at him just centimeters from his face and then touching his face curiously. Sasuke frowned, looking to the Hokage for what he should do, but he wasn't given the chance as the boy suddenly lashed out at him. He immediately grabbed a kunai from his holster, dodging the boy's attacks with confusion. 1 minute the feral boy was just sitting there, doing nothing except looking, and then suddenly he attacks. Sasuke kept dodging his attacks until he got annoyed with the blonde boy and swiped at the boy with his kunai. The boy leapt away, snarling at him, and then dashed for the window. Sasuke watched with the others as the boy was intercepted by an Umbu wearing an elephant mask and dragged away from the window. He watched as the blonde boy, Naruto the Sandame had said, dug his feet into the group and jerked forward, the slick mud and excrement allowing him to break free of the Umbu's hold. He raced for the window again, but was stopped when the hawk Umbu stepped in front of it. Crossing his arms, the Umbu stared down at the feral child as he snarled and backed away, his movements jerky and hurried as he searched the rest of the room. While it was obvious the boy was looking for another exit, he didn't once try to open the door or even approach it. Instead, he seemed oblivious to it. Another growl escaped the feral child's throat, those blue eyes focused upon him, and he slightly crouched as if readying to charge. His teammate, sensing the same thing, quickly intercepted and grabbed the boy by the shoulder and harshly jerked his knee into the boy's stomach. Enough! I said to retain him, not terrorize him, the Sandaime said harshly as Naruto knelt on the floor, clutching his stomach. The Umbu bowed and stepped away with an utterance of apology that was obviously false. Slowly, he tried to approach Naruto, but the boy leapt away and crawled back onto the couch to watch them with hooded eyes. Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked, watching warily as the boy huddled against the couch yet in a stance that made it possible for him to attack or leap away at any point. You, Sandaime said, pointing to one of the Umbu, get some food, preferably raw meat. Hi, Hokage-sama. The Umbu bowed and then disappeared out the door. Naruto, seeing this, immediately headed towards the door, his eyes large with wonder, but no matter how he hit, scratched or pulled at the door, it wouldn't open for him. Growling, he slumped back over to the couch and sulked in the corner. Can't we clean him up? Sasuke groused, annoyed at his dirted clothes, the stench filling the room and with his unasked questions. Aye, Sasuke-kun. The Sandaime said, he's been removed from everything familiar with him and has gone through enough trauma. Removing his covering would only make him more volatile. Scavenger and hunting animals usually do something like this to mask their scent and to throw off their prey. Most likely he was hunting when you came upon him. The door opened once again, and the Umbu set the plate of raw meat on the Hokage's desk at his gesture. Hokage-sama, he said, bowing once again and then quickly stepping away to keep clear of the feral boy still hunched on the couch. For a few minutes, the Sandaime did nothing but watch as Naruto sniffed the air and zeroed in on the meat sitting on his desk. The boy shifted on the couch, but didn't come closer for the food. Instead, he seemed to be calculating something as he looked from the meat to the Hokage and then back. Picking up the plate, he slowly approached Naruto and showed him the meat in his hand, but Naruto refused to take it from his hands, growling when he tried to move closer. Taking a step back, the Sandaime laid it down on the ground carefully next to the couch and retreated a couple feet, watching for Naruto's reaction. The blonde quickly snatched the meat from the ground and grabbed the raw meat and devoured it, oblivious to the disgusted stares of the other people in the room. He sniffed the air and glared at Sandaime, who was holding the other slices of meat. He growled at him and continued to glare until the Hokage laid down another piece of meat, but this time Naruto would have to approach him. With surprising speed, Naruto darted off the couch to where Sandaime had laid the meat and back to his safeguard in seconds, the meat gone soon after that. He growled again, and this time Sandaime held out the meat, waiting for Naruto to come to him once more, but Naruto stared at his hand disdainfully. There was no way he was going over there. Come on, little one, Sandaime coaxed, taking a step towards him, but refusing to go any further. I know you're hungry, do you want this? He held up the meat and Naruto's fixated gaze followed it. Sasuke didn't say a word, remaining stoic and cold, as he watched the Hokage try to coax the blonde boy into coming closer to him. It was a waste of time, the boy was obviously deranged and beyond help. It would be better just to kill the poor creature and let everyone get on with their lives. Naruto eyed the meat. It was good, he wanted more and he didn't have to work for this meat. Yet the yellow creature refused to come any closer and he refused to move from his perch. He knew not to trust the thing in front of him, but scouting the area, he saw no other alternative. There was no other way out except through the entrance to his right, though he had seen one of the black creatures leave through the wall, but he didn't understand how that worked. He heard a small sigh and his eyes immediately locked on the pale creature again. He snarled at him, challenging him, but the pale creature ignored him. Growling, he issued a challenge again, but again, he received no answer. Eyes narrowing, he jumped down from his perch to study the thing once more. This one didn't look as strong as him, and yet it was this one who had beaten him twice. He did not want to defer to the stronger creature, but the odd thing wouldn't engage in a wrestle with him to determine the stronger of the two. Naruto looked at the other creatures. They were all watching the two of them with soft eyes, nothing malicious in them. Like he snarled, he hated those dreams, he did not understand them and they always left him shuddering afterwards. Now he had finally found another creature that looked like him, and these ones did not speak. The pale creature looked down at him as Naruto got in his face once more, trying to understand this thing before him. He gave his fur a tentative sniff before taking some in his fingers and pulling on it. He was amused when the creature snarled at him and ripped his fur away from his fingertips. So the creature could speak his language. Naruto growled low and waited for an affirmative answer, but it never came. He frowned, giving a small yell, but again the creature refused to respond. He bit his lip, a habit he did not understand, and then tackled the pale thing to the ground, pinning him down. The creature struggled, but a sharp nip and reprimanding growl from him made the creature just look up at him. He turned his head to see 4 of the black creatures running towards him, but the yellow one stopped them with a sharp sound. Naruto returned to studying the creature beneath him, staring into his eyes hard as he sniffed at the thing. He couldn't understand these creatures smelled almost just like him, and yet they did not speak the same language. He slowly brought a hand up and traced every inch of the creature's face, frowning down as he recognized the structure as his own. He then looked down at Odd's skin, touching it carefully, and was surprised to find it soft and smooth, moving beneath his fingers. Yet, as it moved away to show pale skin beneath it, he hissed and jumped away in disgust. What type of creature has movable skin? He made sure not to move too far away and watched as the creature hesitantly sat up, black eyes watching Naruto with chilling indifference. Yet the creature didn't continue to stand, it stayed crouched on the ground beside him. Taking this as an acceptance of challenge, Naruto suddenly launched himself at the creature, ready to prove he was the stronger of the two, and successfully knocked the pale thing to the ground once more. He straddled his waist and growled menacingly, nipping at his exposed neck to show he was stronger, but the creature suddenly flipped them over and pinned down his arms and legs. Naruto growled and tried to bite at the creature's arms, bucking his hips to throw it off, but the creature held fast. Minutes passed as Naruto struggled and the creature continued to hold him steadfast. When the struggling finally ceased, their eyes locked, and some kind of silent war passed between them. It was Naruto who finally looked away first, and his body just sagged as he gave in. This creature was stronger than him, and he had to show him the proper reverence shown towards such creatures. Sasuke stared down into the bright blue eyes and ignored the small growls he could hear coming from the boy's throat. He watched as the rivalry between them passed through his eyes, and then just as quickly it disappeared and the boy looked away. Slowly he moved off the boy, but Sasuke remained ready to defend in case Naruto attacked again. Naruto climbed to his feet and looked at Sasuke again before dropping into a crouch beside him, looking none too happy about it. When Sasuke tried to move away, the boy followed, and when Kakashi tried to approach them, Naruto tried to attack him, protecting Sasuke. Sandaime sighed, "Stay away from them. Naruto has decided Sasuke is his leader in a way and he'll protect him no matter what." Sasuke growled, "I don't want him following me around." "Unfortunately, you have no choice. You have proven to be stronger than him, and so therefore he will follow you and only you." Sitting down at his desk, the Sandaime pulled out a piece of parchment and began to write a decree regarding the blonde boy. "Kakashi-san, I know that you recently lost a team member, and while I'm sure you all are still recovering from her death, this is a matter of great urgency. As always, we are at your service, Hokage-sama," Kakashi answered, tilting his head towards the elder. "But what exactly is it you are requesting?" "I'm putting Naruto in your charge," the Hokage said, glancing briefly at the two boys standing nearby. "Because the boy will not leave Sasuke-san's side, he'll have to live at the Uchiha mansion with you and Kakashi-san. You will live there as well until we're certain of the boy's stability." "He's unstable," Sasuke answered flatly, glaring at the grimy child who refused to leave his side. "That is to be seen," he answered, placing his seal upon the parchment. "Because of the delicacy of this assignment, I am listing it as a B-rank mission to which you two are assigned until further notice. I expect you to teach him the language as well as how to dress, act, and the ways of our village. You, Sasuke," he said, handing the Uchiha the parchment stating the blonde was now under his care, much to the young genin's annoyance, "are now his caretaker, and you, Kakashi, are now in charge of both of them." Kakashi smiled, "Of course." Turning to Sasuke, he asked, "When should I move my stuff in?" Sasuke was fuming inside. This was ridiculous. He now had a wild, deranged, naked boy living in his house along with his perverted, also deranged in his opinion, sensei who was now moving his belongings into a guest room. Sasuke was leaning against the wall, his mask on his face with flickers of annoyance filtering through, his arms crossed and his head bent down glaring at the naked boy sitting next to him. "Dobe," he muttered before walking into his room, Naruto just on his heels. He turned around and stared at the naked boy stinking up his room with excrement, and leaving trails of mud and who knows what else throughout his house. "Bath," he growled, pointing into the room connected to his. Naruto just continued to stare at him. Sasuke sighed in annoyance and stormed towards the room, Naruto following closely behind him. Once the naked boy was inside, he closed and locked the door and then shoved him into the shower. He turned on the water and closed the shower door, locking the blonde inside. Naruto looked at the small space, feeling safe for the first time. This was almost like his den in the woods and he liked it until it began raining. He yelled, turning around and seeing no way out as the rain continued to fall from the ceiling. He didn't like this anymore. What kind of creature would want to live in a leaky den? Didn't they get flooded and cold? He still had to hunt too. He couldn't let his covering slip off or the prey would scent him, and then he'd starve. Naruto looked around and saw a small opening at the top, just large enough for him to slide out. He didn't even think as he jumped for it, his claws grabbing the top, and climbed out, dropping to the hard ground a wet, slimy mess. He looked up at the pale creature and was surprised to see him. Naruto crouched low, trying to understand what the creature wanted. Then he was being hauled up and thrown into a small puddle that was somehow still deep. He cried out in surprise and began flailing his arms around, trying to climb out of the water, but the pale creature held him still, dunking him underneath the water and then pulling him up just to dunk him again. He took gasping breaths every time he was let out a pitiful whine that he was upset. He finally stopped flailing around and let the creature do what he wanted, still yowling and shaking his head. Sasuke growled. He was completely soaked now and the stupid boy kept trying to climb out of the damn tub. He'd grab onto the sides and try to pull himself out, but he kept dunking the blonde boy each time. This is ridiculous, he muttered as he pushed the boy underneath the water again, trying to get rid of the horrible smell. Why'd he cover himself in shit anyways? Wouldn't a roll in the dirt and twigs cover his scent enough? The boy finally calmed down, and Sasuke stopped dunking him, grabbing a bottle of shampoo off the side of the tub. He wrinkled his nose in disgust at having to touch that matted blonde hair, but he was more determined to have his house smelling nice and staying clean than having to touch the blonde. He poured a generous amount onto his hands and attacked the blonde matted hair, scrubbing and pulling at it, not wanting to know what exactly was in that hair. He then dunked the blonde again and got ready to scrub at the hair again, but Naruto tried to launch himself out of the tub again. Sasuke grabbed his shoulders and pushed him back down, but at the last second, Naruto grabbed him as well and dragged him in. Sasuke gasped in surprise as he surfaced for air, the blonde still clinging to him. Dope! He growled lowly and Naruto shrunk back in surprise. He looked down at his soaked clothes and glared at the naked blonde. Grabbing a bar of soap he set to scrubbing the blonde clean of any dirt and excrement, trying not to think of what he was now sitting in. Naruto continued to move back, trying to get away from the soap, and Sasuke finally got annoyed enough that he pinned Naruto against the back of the tub and began scrubbing at his skin, lathering it up with as much soap as possible. He set the soap on the side again and grabbed a washcloth, using it to remove the caked shit from Naruto's skin. Tan skin came into view as Sasuke washed away the grime and soon most of it was removed. Sasuke was surprised to see Naruto did have muscle. After all, he had thought the blonde boy was just skin and bones, but as he moved down to scrub at his arms and legs he saw the toned muscle beneath the tan skin. He looked up at Naruto's miserable face and grabbed the shampoo again. It still wasn't clean. He didn't think the blonde would be clean until he took 4 baths a day for a month. Naruto, now understanding what that bottle meant, hissed, but didn't lash out as Sasuke began scrubbing at his hair once more, trying to remove the knots and twigs stuck there. Looking down at the brown water in disgust, and quickly stepped out, dragging the blonde with him and pushed them both back into the shower. He turned it on and held Naruto fast as the water began falling down on them in a heavy spray. He yelled and tried to jump onto the top again, but Sasuke refused to let him leave. He kept washing his hair until all the shampoo was gone, and then grabbed his bottle of conditioner he kept in the shower. He used a generous amount to lather his hair, and then pushed him under the stream of water again until it was washed of it. He then turned the blonde around, looking for more of the caked mess and then giving him one more good cleaning before turning off the water. "Come on, dope," he muttered, pulling the shivering blonde out of the shower and turning around to grab a couple towels. Yet just as he turned around, Naruto shook his body vigorously, trying to get rid of the water, and began rubbing against the ground. "Hey! Stop that!" Sasuke yelled, throwing that towel at the blonde. Naruto stopped at the sharp reprimand and looked at the cloth in confusion, staring up at Sasuke for directions. Sasuke sighed, and began drying his body, clothes and hair, watching as the boy slowly began mimicking his movements, his face frowning with confusion and concentration. As soon as they were both mostly dry, Sasuke led the blonde back into his bedroom, sitting the blonde on the bed and then walking to his dresser to find some clothes for him and the boy. He began removing his shirt, but stopped when Naruto gasped and let out a whimper. He turned around to see Naruto eyeing his shirt and then his chest. "What?" he asked, pulling the shirt all the way off and dropping it to the ground. He then removed his shorts and boxers while the blonde continued to whimper as if he was in pain. He quickly dressed again and then turned to the blonde, now staring wide-eyed at him in shock. Sasuke frowned. All he did was change clothes. He walked towards Naruto and held out the clothes for him, but Naruto shook his head, refusing. Sasuke growled. He was not going to go through this, but when Naruto refused again, he sighed, trying to quell his anger, and took the shirt in his hands. Before Naruto could do anything, he slipped it over his head and pulled his arms through. Naruto gasped and jumped away, scratching at the shirt and looking around wild-eyed. He kept pulling on it, but it wouldn't come off, and he finally looked at Sasuke, trying to understand. Sasuke held up the lounge pants and slowly approached the upset blonde, still uncertain of what was wrong. When Naruto didn't move away, he took a foot in one hand and began pulling lounge pants up while Naruto continued to watch him with increasing panic. He finally pulled them all the way on and stepped back as the blonde curled up on his bed and began whining. "Kakashi-sensei!" Sasuke finally yelled, "Something's wrong with him." The silver-haired ninja appeared in seconds and looked at the shaking boy. He slowly approached Naruto and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Naruto?" he asked in a hushed voice. The blonde didn't move and Kakashi sighed. "What exactly happened?" he asked Sasuke as he reached out to pet the blonde locks. Sasuke shrugged. "I gave him a bath and put clothes on him, then the dobe just started whining like this." "You didn't molest him?" Kakashi grinned, making Sasuke huff in annoyance. "It was after you put the clothes on." "Hi." He nodded. It's the clothes he's never seen any before, or at least not in years, and he's scared by them. Sasuke cocked an eyebrow. "He probably thinks it's our skin, and we just put it on him," Kakashi explained, continuing to pet the blonde until he calmed down some. Blue eyes finally looked up at him, and the blonde came towards him, sniffing him curiously. He then turned to Sasuke, asking silently if the silver ninja could be trusted. Sasuke stared back at him and then snorted, rolling his eyes. That seemed enough confirmation of Naruto because he then sat down beside Kakashi, copying his posture, dropping both legs off the side of the bed, turning his torso to look at Sasuke and leaning one hand back on the bed to hold his weight. Kakashi couldn't help but smile, but Sasuke just scowled at the blonde before turning to his dresser to grab a brush. He then sat down on the bed and pulled lightly on Naruto's arm. "Sit," he said, pointing to the ground between his feet. Curious, Naruto tried to follow what Sasuke had said and sat facing him, looking up. Sasuke sighed, keeping the annoyance out of his voice as he said, "Turn around." He quickly turned the blonde around so his back was to the bed, and Sasuke quickly began brushing at his hair, using a kunai to cut out the matted hair when needed. He worked in silence even as the blonde tried to turn around to see what he was doing, and finished an hour later, cutting off most of the blonde hair until Naruto was left with soft, unmated blonde spikes. Kakashi nodded. "Good job, Sasuke." He smiled and then patted Naruto on the head. "You too, Naruto." Blue eyes looked up in confusion, but Kakashi just smiled and then walked away. "Well, I'm going to bed." "Have fun, Sasuke." Sasuke growled, but stood up and began going to another room to put Naruto in. The blonde followed just behind him, and Sasuke opened the doors to the bedroom next to his. He stepped back as Naruto entered it, looking around at the unfurnished room except for a light, a bed and a dresser. He pointed at the bed. "You sleep here," he said, but Naruto kept staring around. Sasuke sighed and steered the blonde to the bed, pulling back the covers and getting Naruto to lie down. He then pulled the covers back up over the blonde and began leaving. Yet he wasn't even to the door, before the blonde boy was beside him again. He sighed and put the blonde back into the bed. "Stay," he growled and left again. This time he got to his bedroom before Naruto appeared again, and once more he put the blonde back into the bed. "Stay," he ordered and stomped out of the room. He waited a couple minutes before sliding into his bed and trying to sleep. It felt so different to know someone else was in his house, even if it was a deranged dobe and a perverted teacher, and he was surprised to find that he wasn't so sure he hated it. Sasuke awoke the next day and slid out of bed, groaning at the rising sun. The account of yesterday's transpirations came immediately to mind, and he groaned again, wondering if Kakashi was up yet or still asleep. At least now he could make certain the lazy Jounin was on time, but that also brought up the other addition to his household, the insane blonde-haired child called Naruto that he had found in the woods. He sighed at the thought of the blue-eyed blonde and stretched, wondering if, and hoping that, the creature had ran away in the middle of the night. He dressed in his normal outfit of a blue-collared shirt and white shorts, strapping his holster to his leg and filling it carefully with kunai and shuriken, and glanced in the mirror once before tying his hayate in place. He then started towards the door only to stop and stare at Naruto curled up by the door asleep. The blonde-haired boy was curled up like a cat, his head hidden in his arms and a serene expression on his face as he slept. The shirt had come off at some point, but his pants had remained on his hips, though low-riding, and Sasuke could finally see just how starved the blonde had been. Every rib could be seen. His waist was so thin that Sasuke was amazed the kid had survived this long, but it didn't change the fact that he was still starved. He let his eyes roam over the tan body. He did look a lot better not covered in mud, and his hair was a brighter shade of blonde than he had first thought, almost the color of the sun. One could say it was sun-kissed. Sasuke knelt down and shook his shoulder. "Oh, wake up, Dobe," he said, but the blonde just growled and curled up tighter. "Dobe," he muttered, trying again. This time blue eyes snapped open and the blonde lashed out, catching Sasuke on the arm, and leapt away, placing his back against the door. The blonde growled and looked wild-eyed around the room, searching for an exit. He began breathing quicker, his eyes becoming a slight red tint as he looked around the room in panic. His eyes focused on the window, and before Sasuke could even react, the blonde barreled towards it, leaping into it and falling through it. A painful yelp was the last he heard as he fell out of the two-story house to the ground. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as he rushed to the broken window and looked out to see Naruto lying unconscious on the ground, bleeding from his head and chest. "Shit!" he muttered, throwing the window open and leaping down beside the prone boy. He was covered in broken glass and slight cuts, but the main were to his head and chest, both embedded with glass. He carefully picked up the blonde and carried him back to house, only to be locked out. "Damn it! Kakashi-sensei!" he yelled, but of course the silver ninja didn't answer. He took a breath and jumped up to his roof, walking up to his window and crawling back through, careful to not injure the blonde idiot anymore. He laid him down on the bed and then disappeared into his bathroom. Living alone had at least taught him how to tend to his own wounds. He returned and sat down beside the blonde, carefully removing the two largest pieces of glass from his temple and chest. "Fuck!" he swore when the wounds began bleeding profusely. He quickly grabbed a swab and pressed it against the two wounds tightly, blocking the blood flow. Thoughts of his last teammate Hikari came to mind. He shuddered remembering the mangled body lying in front of him. It had been their first real mission. They were to guard a man from ninjas while taking him back to his village. He didn't remember the man's name, but he was a bridge builder, and on the way they met up with a formidable missing nin named Zabuza and his assistant Haku. They had fought on the bridge against them, Kakashi against Zabuza, Sakura guarding the bridge builder, and he and Hikari fighting against Haku. Hikari was a good ninja, very skilled, but against Haku, she didn't stand a chance. Together they had beaten his ice mirror jutsu, but Hikari had suffered the most and had died in the end. Sasuke wasn't able to get to her fast enough when Haku had released his needle jutsu, hitting her near the main arteries. Had she left the needles where they were, she probably would have been alive, but she had ripped them out in haste and nicked the artery. Sasuke could only watch as his teammate died before him seconds before Haku had sacrificed himself to save Zabuza. He shook off the dark memories and focused on saving the blonde boy lying on his bed bleeding. Elsewhere in the house, Kakashi was up and about, humming as he went into the kitchen, searching for food. He opened Sasuke's refrigerator and tisked when he saw all the healthy foods. "Sasuke, you need some real food," he muttered, grabbing an apple and closing the fridge. He thought by now Sasuke would be up and warming up or at least eating something, yet he had yet to see the stoic spiky-haired boy since last night. Come to think of it, I haven't seen Naruto either, he thought, frowning. He got up and started up the stairs towards Sasuke's room. He doubted the stoic teenager overslept. That wasn't like Sasuke, but maybe something happened between him and Naruto. He didn't even bother to knock on the door, opting instead to just walk in. "Yo!" Sasuke looked up, his hands bloody and swabs thrown on the ground forgotten, at his sensei. The bleeding was finally beginning to slow, but now the blonde's hair was dyed red and his chest covered with smears of blood. Kakashi was next to them in seconds, his eye taking in Naruto's present state with sudden seriousness. "What happened?" he asked. Dobe jumped through the window. Sasuke muttered, throwing another bloody rag to the ground and grabbing another one. He had two pieces of glass lodged into his body, one in his temple and one in his chest. "The head wound has stopped bleeding, but the chest wound was deeper than I thought and has yet to stop. Good thing he has a thick skull," he joked, but Sasuke just glared. "And where were you?" Sasuke snorted, turning back to the blonde, but paused in his ministrations as Naruto began to awaken, his eyes fluttering open. Yet both of them were taken by surprise when a wretched sound came from Naruto as if he was choking and in pain while a red glimmer began to surround the wounds. Sasuke leapt back, taking out a kunai, while Kakashi just watched the two wounds heal as Naruto began to foam at the mouth, his chest heaving as the painful sounds continued to come from his throat. "What's happening?" Sasuke asked, but Kakashi motioned him silent. Naruto's face contorted with pain, his hands gripping the sheets and his back arching off the bed, and he let out another cry of pain. Sasuke could only stare wide-eyed as the blonde struggled and fought against something, though he could not tell what, while Kakashi just watched him, preparing to slay the boy if Kyuubi broke free. Suddenly Naruto fell silent, his breathing shallow and slow, his eyes closing once more and his muscles relaxed. Kakashi slowly approached the prone figure, one hand on his holster ready to defend himself and his country if it came to that. He reached out and shook Naruto's shoulder, praying it wouldn't come to killing the boy. A hand grabbed his wrist and Kakashi looked into deep red blood eyes full of killing intent. Kyuubi growled, showing his elongated canines, and tightened his grip on Kakashi's wrist. Kakashi quickly brought a kunai up, cutting Kyuubi across his arm and effectively making the fox demon drop his wrist. Kyuubi snarled once and shook his head in annoyance. The wound Kakashi gave it already healed. Sasuke, stay back, he whispered, withdrawing another kunai and preparing to kill the blonde boy who had been missing for so long. Yet Kyuubi shook his head again, closing his eyes and growling lowly as if arguing. Kakashi took a breath and drew his kunai up for the killing blow, but stopped when vibrant blue eyes looked up at him with curiosity. Naruto cocked his head and stared up at him, uncertain of what the kunai was for. Sasuke remained silent, but he couldn't believe Kakashi was going to kill the boy. Wasn't the whole point he was here was to help him become well human? He didn't look like a threat, maybe to himself, but certainly not a threat to anyone else. The Jounin studied the boy before him, calculating as he looked for any hint of the Kyuubi, but found none. Kakashi slowly lowered his kunai and stepped away from the blonde boy, letting out a sigh of relief. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. There was something here he didn't know, and there was no way in hell he was going to allow some creature to live in his house without knowing everything. Naruto hopped off the bed, sniffing at his blood curiously, and then walked back over to Sasuke's side, sitting down at his feet. Kakashi put his kunai away and turned to them, smiling once more. Well, he seems fine now, he said. I'll go tell Sakura training is cancelled for the rest of the week. We need to get him used to a couple things before he meets another person. Sasuke was about to protest, but Kakashi disappeared in a cloud of smoke and left the two of them alone. Naruto hissed at the sudden disappearance and hid behind Sasuke, uncertain of what transpired. He growled in annoyance and slowly moved to sniff around the area Kakashi had just been standing. He wrinkled his nose at the smell of sulfur and smoke, but looked at Sasuke for an explanation. Sasuke sighed and just walked into the bathroom, dragging the reluctant Naruto behind him. He wasn't about to let him wander around his house covered in blood, and he wanted to be certain those wounds really were gone. He locked the bathroom door and went to fill the bathtub while Naruto paced the large bathroom, jumping up to perch on the toilet finally. Oh hell no, Sasuke muttered. There was no way in hell was going to potty train a teenager. That would just have to be Kakashi's job. He was bathing the damn blonde, and that alone was enough to drive him up the wall. He wasn't patient, that was a well-known fact by his teammates, and trying to bathe Naruto was like trying to hold onto a fish out of water. Once the bathtub was full, Sasuke stripped the pants off Naruto and threw him into the tub, ready when Naruto tried to jump out again. The blonde growled at him and he growled back, pushing him firmly back into the water. Stay, he said, knowing the blonde at least understood that to some context. Naruto huffed, but stopped struggling and sat with his arms crossed and a cute frown on his face as Sasuke washed the blood off. He fingered where the wounds were, but much to his surprise there wasn't even a mark, almost as if he had never been injured in the first place. Sasuke frowned, but knew the blonde couldn't answer him, so he just continued to wash him. He gave Naruto the washcloth and using his hand, began washing his arms and stomach until the blonde began doing it on his own. Sasuke leaned back, watching as Naruto washed at his skin, sniffing the water and playing with the soap with amazement. He finally dropped his wet clothes onto the ground and stepped into the shower, taking his morning shower and getting ready for the day, taking care of the idiot. When he stepped back out, Naruto had already climbed out and shook water all over the place as he sat once more perched on top of the toilet. He watched Sasuke curiously as the stoic ninja exited the shower and practically jumped on him to examine his body without clothes. Sasuke roughly pushed him off and threw a towel at him, scowling. He wrapped the towel around his waist and stormed into his bedroom, the blue-eyed teen right on his heels. He growled at him, making Naruto back off, and dressed once more in the same outfit. Naruto frowned again and dropped the towel he had been dragging behind him to pick at Sasuke's clothes curiously. Sasuke smacked his hand away and glared at him, yet the blonde wasn't deterred and pulled down on Sasuke's shirt, trying to understand the clothing. Stop! Sasuke finally snapped, throwing a pair of pants at Naruto. The blonde stared at them and then up at Sasuke, trying to understand what they were for again, but not remembering. Sasuke sighed and pushed the blonde onto the ground and taking the pants from Naruto's hands. The blonde glared while Sasuke pulled the pants on and huffed at him in annoyance again. He didn't like this idea of clothing, he never needed it before, and he didn't need it now. Sasuke groaned. 3 hours ago Naruto had discovered the kitchen meant food and was still looking in the cabinets. He had seen Sasuke open the fridge and also the cabinets, and discovered happily how to do it as well. Now his kitchen was a battle zone, food scattered everywhere, Kens laying on the ground forgotten while Naruto perched on the counter with a handful of meat in one hand and an apple in the other. Hokage better compensate him for all this trouble. He may be rich, but he didn't think he could afford the blonde's eating habits. Naruto suddenly stopped eating, looking at Sasuke before hopping down and approaching him, holding out his half-eaten apple to the stoic ninja. No, Sasuke said with disgust, but Naruto continued to hold the apple out in front of him. He growled at the blonde and pushed his hand away. No. Naruto pouted, but offered the meat, trying again. Sasuke took a breath, trying to his temper, and took some of the meat, nodding to Naruto. The blonde brightened and jumped into the chair beside Sasuke, munching happily on his apple again. Sasuke sighed and closed his eyes. The blonde idiot may not be able to speak, but he was hyper and very lively, especially now that he had food. Already, 6 lamps were broken, there were stains on his carpet, and his couch had scratch marks in them. He knew the next thing he was going to do was trim those damn nails. They were ridiculously long, but he wanted his sensei there with him before he attempted that. Speaking of the perverted jounin, he still hadn't returned. Kakashi entered Sandame's office, taking a seat before the old Hokage, and waited patiently until he finished with the paperwork before him. After an hour of silence, Sandame finally pushed the stack of papers away and looked at Kakashi. "I'm guessing this is about Naruto." "Hi. I have a couple concerns," Kakashi said, his arms crossed comfortably as he looked at Sandame levelly. "We had an episode already. He jumped out Sasuke's bedroom window and deeply injured his chest. I was certain we'd have to bring him here, but somehow he healed his wounds, though he sounded like he was in a lot of pain." He paused before going on. "Kyuubi took over Hokage-sama, and he almost attacked me. I injured him again, but the wound disappeared within seconds." "Have you killed him?" Sandame asked in a low voice. "No. Just before I was about to, Naruto came into control again and returned to the mute blonde boy he is. What I don't understand is how Naruto was able to use Kyuubi's chakra in the first place. He shouldn't understand chakra at all." Sandame remained silent for a while, contemplating what Kakashi had reported and what this would mean. "You said he sounded as if he was in pain?" Kakashi nodded. "Kyuubi is forcing his chakra through Naruto's body because Naruto doesn't understand how to use chakra. He can't use Kyuubi's chakra, but the fox's host was in danger of bleeding to death, or at least it thought so, and therefore Kyuubi is forcing his chakra to heal him." He sighed. "It's dangerous to force chakra through a body so malnourished and untrained, but again, this is Kyuubi we are talking about, a creature we cannot completely comprehend. Is there a way we can stop Kyuubi from forcing his chakra?" "Not without crippling Naruto's chakra as well," Sandame sighed. "If we did that, he may never be able to use chakra ever, and it might never stop Kyuubi from forcing its chakra into its host." "Then it is painful?" "Very. If it happens again, bring Naruto to me immediately. We need to be certain nothing inside is being harmed." Yet Naruto was able to regain control over Kyuubi, so the boy knows about the fox then, or at least subconsciously does. Sandame stood up. "We'll have to watch him closely, and I don't want to think about what will happen once the village and shinobi know he's alive." Kakashi nodded. He still remembered that night. When news came back that the caravan had been attacked by unknown ninjas and the demon child had been destroyed, everyone celebrated. Or at least almost everyone. Those who were older and had fought against the fox monster knew what had been sacrificed that night to contain the beast and mourned the loss of Naruto and all others with him. "For now this remains between us, Sasuke and the 6 Sanbu who were present, understand? This is of the utmost secrecy. I don't want anyone attacking Naruto in the middle of the night, especially with Sasuke mixed into this." Speaking of which, Sasuke saw Kyuubi take over and also heal Naruto's wounds, and I'm certain he's going to question me when I return. Sandame slowly nodded. "Tell him. It is his home after all, and he's in the most danger." Kakashi nodded and stood. "Hokage-sama?" Another nod from Sandame, and Kakashi left, going to stop by the bridge and talk with Sakura about their break. Then he'd just go and visit a couple people, maybe pick up a new book, train, and then go back to Sasuke's house. Sasuke shoved Naruto into the living room and sat him down on the couch. "Stay, damn it," he said, pointing at him, and then storming back into the kitchen. He pulled out a bucket and sponge and began washing the floor and counters, picking up the salvageable cans and putting them away once more. Almost everything in his refrigerator was lost, and now he'd have to go to the store again, though he went only days ago. He moved to the table, wiping off the crumbs, water, and whatever the hell else was on it off. He finally got the kitchen in working order again and came into the living room, surprised the blonde hadn't followed him again. He looked over the edge of the couch and stared down at the sleeping teen, curled up again just as before. He smirked. So the blonde hyperactive teen did have a limit. It seemed he was beat as well, and settling down on the couch next to Naruto, he closed his eyes and dozed off. Kakashi entered a couple hours before nightfall, looking at the two sleeping on the couch and smiling. He slowly approached Sasuke, but saw the dark eyes glint in the fading light even before he was feet within range. Just like Sasuke. He nodded to the dark shinobi and motioned for him to follow him. Sasuke stood, glancing at Naruto, and then followed his sensei into the kitchen, taking a seat at the table. "Tell me," he said coldly, his eyes never leaving his teacher. "Naruto is the Kyuubi Kitsune, the fox demon from 12 years ago," Kakashi said blandly, taking a seat across from Sasuke. He was killed. It's a lie. He shrugged. Then what happened to him? Kakashi cocked an eyebrow. He was taking this a lot better than he had thought, but then, this was the kid who had his family murdered by his own brother, and remained alone for years. 8 years ago, a caravan left with Naruto. It was a select few ninjas who were willing to raise Naruto in a different village, a village who didn't know who or what was locked inside of him. Kakashi looked down at his hands. Word of the caravan reached the ears of some unknown shinobi. No one knows which village, and they were attacked. Everyone was killed, and so we thought Naruto as well. We never found a body of a child, but we believed that they had taken Naruto's body with them for whatever reason. When word came back that Naruto was dead, everyone celebrated. Drinking and parties were held everywhere except by those who understand Naruto is not Kyuubi, Sasuke, Kakashi said, looking the teen straight in the eye. The fourth Hokage gave his life to lock that monster inside of him, but Naruto is still Naruto, something most of the people here can't see, unfortunately. So then how did he survive all these years? He looked as if he was about to starve when I stumbled across him. Sasuke asked. Though Naruto still has control over his body, Kyuubi's instincts are what saved Naruto's life. That's why he thinks more like a fox than a human. Everything he does is like a fox except for a few select things. When he bared his neck to you, he was showing who was stronger, and he'll only eat after you take your share because foxes are scavengers and will give up their meal to a stronger predator and return afterwards. And what happened today? Kakashi remained silent, studying Sasuke before answering. Kyuubi took control of Naruto, that's why his eyes turned red. He forced his chakra through Naruto's body and healed the wounds, but Naruto was in so much pain he couldn't stop Kyuubi from taking over. It seems subconsciously Naruto understands the danger of letting the fox out, and has remained in control most of the time. Sasuke crossed his arms. And he's in my house. Is he a threat? Yes. He nodded and stood again. Fine. I want to be compensated for all this trouble though, Kakashi-sensei. He tore apart my kitchen earlier, he's damaged my carpet and my couch. I need to go shopping again tomorrow for more food and cleaner, he said before returning to the living room where Naruto was just waking up. Sasuke looked down at him as sleepy blue eyes blinked up at him. Kakashi followed behind, staring at the cute blonde, and came to lean on the couch. Yo. Sasuke knelt down in front of him and pointing at himself. Sasuke. Naruto cocked his head and looked at him. He tried again. I'm Sasuke, he said, and then pointed at Naruto. Kakashi nodded, pointing at himself. Kakashi. Naruto continued to stare, his brow furrowing with concentration. He pointed at Sasuke. Sasuke? He said in a low whisper. He then pointed at Kakashi. Sasuke? Sasuke shook his head. He pointed at himself. Sasuke then pointed at Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei. He then looked at Naruto expectantly. Slowly he pointed at Kakashi. Kakakakashir? Sasuke nodded and Naruto pointed at him. Sasuke? Sasuke nodded again. Naruto furrowed his brow again and placed his hand on his chest. Kitsune. Kakashi moved closer and looked at the blonde. Kyuubi? He asked, watching him closely. Naruto frowned, licking his lips, and then repeated. Kitsune. Kakashi-sensei, how is it he speaks? Sasuke asked, trying to understand just what was happening. Kyuubi's instincts just took over, not Kyuubi himself. I hope, he added silently. Naruto was 5 when the caravan was attacked, so he was capable of speech and also knows some manners and probably a little ninjutsu. But when Naruto was abandoned, Kyuubi had to give him the instincts to survive. It seems he has retained some remembrance of speech. Naruto cocked his head, his face wrinkled as he tried to understand what they were saying. He understood Kyuubi, that was the evil locked inside of him, and the word Naruto was familiar to him, though he didn't understand what it meant, and the word made him feel anxious and upset. Kakashi's eyes never left the blonde, even when he was speaking with Sasuke. He pointed at Naruto and said, Kyuubi? The blonde growled and pointed at his head. Kitsune. He then pointed at his stomach and growled again. So he knows, Kakashi whispered, looking Naruto's slim frame up and down. He then squatted down, Naruto following suit, and looking at the blonde in the eyes. He pointed at him and said, Naruto? He frowned again. Kitsune. He repeated. No. Naruto. Kitsune. He insisted. The silver-haired ninja looked over at Sasuke and sighed. Kitsune it is. Standing up again, he looked at Sasuke. Well, I've had a long day, I think I'll retire now. Bye. Before Sasuke could say a word, Kakashi was gone, leaving Sasuke, once again, alone with Naruto. He sighed and looked at the blonde still crouched on the ground. Come on. He muttered and started up the stairs, Naruto following after him. Sasuke, Naruto said, and the stoic ninja turned around to look at him, but Naruto just cocked his head and stared at him with large blue eyes. Sasuke sighed and turned around again, walking towards Naruto's room to get him ready for bed again. Sasuke, Naruto said again. What? He snapped, making the blonde gasp. He immediately looked down and said nothing more. Sasuke sighed and raked his hand through his hair, pushing the blonde into his room. He tucked him into the bed and then started out, pausing at the door to say stay, before moving to his room. Tomorrow we'll begin teaching him, Kakashi said from his room, leaning against the doorframe. Hi Kakashi-sensei, he muttered as he passed into his room. Closing and locking the door, he changed out of his clothes and collapsed onto his bed. The hyperactive blonde was certainly a handful, and the information he had gathered today was enough to keep him up all night. Yet he cleared his thoughts and sought sleep, knowing tomorrow would be all the more worse. Well, the day was starting off well. Naruto sat in the kitchen, Ken scattered across the ground again, glaring at Sasuke who was glaring back at him. Kakashi leaned against the door just watching as Sasuke tried to teach Naruto about the foods. No, he repeated when Naruto reached for the food, slapping his hand. The blonde removed his hand with a hiss and glared again. He wanted his food, he wanted it now, and he wasn't getting it. He reached again, but Sasuke slapped his hand once more. No, he growled and Naruto sulked back in his chair. No was a word he had been learning all morning and he was finally understanding it after 4 hours, though he wasn't happy with it. Kakashi finally came into the kitchen and sat down next to Naruto, smiling at the blonde. Naruto. He frowned. Kitsune, he said, and then pointed at Kakashi. Kakashi. He sighed. Close enough. Sasuke, Naruto said, his now favorite word. The teen turned around, but Naruto just stared at him like before, repeating, Sasuke. What Naruto? He asked, sitting down at the table and passing the blonde a plate of food. He gave the other to Kakashi and grabbed an apple for himself. Sasuke, he said again, smiling. What Naruto? The blonde frowned. No, he said. Sasuke cocked an eyebrow. No? No. Kakashi quickly cleared his plate, pulling his mask up before the two saw him and just watched the two boys. No, he said flatly. Naruto nodded. No. Sasuke sighed and bit into his apple. No. Smiling happily, Naruto picked up the food in one hand and tried to eat it, the rice slipping through his fingers. He bolted his food and then looked at Sasuke after cleaning the table free of any spilled food. Sasuke. What? No. Sasuke growled and left the kitchen. This was becoming annoying. Yet Naruto jumped down from his seat and followed Sasuke through the house, watching everything he did and repeating it, much to Sasuke's annoyance. I need to report to Hokage-sama. Be back before dark, Kakashi said, disappearing again. I'm going to kill him, Sasuke muttered before turning back to the blonde, who was perching on the railing. No! He yelled, jerking Naruto off it. Sasuke! Naruto whimpered, but he didn't get back up on the rail. A week later. Sasuke nodded in approval. Naruto had put on the damn lounge pants by himself for once. He was getting tired of having to put those on him, but the blonde still refused to wear a shirt. They had gotten some things down though. No, stay, stop, and what? The blonde's new word was what, and he used it for everything. Walking into the kitchen, Naruto pointed at the table. What? Sasuke sighed. This was the third time today, table, he said, and Naruto nodded, moving to the cabinets and pointing. Cabinet. What? He asked, pointing at Sasuke. Ninja. Sasuke. Hi. Naruto cocked his head, not understanding the word. What? Hi, he repeated, nodding his head. When the blonde just continued to stare, he pointed at him. Kitsune. Naruto nodded and he added hi. Not understanding, the blonde just shrugged and moved to the living room, pointing at the couch. What? Couch. What? Lamp. What? Floor. What? Window. Naruto carefully approached the window and touched the glass, surprised by the clear barrier. What? He asked, tapping on the glass. Glass, Sasuke said, somewhat amused by Naruto's puzzled expression. He looked outside and let out a sigh. No, he whispered, staring at the sky. Sasuke had found him glancing out the windows before, but he had never approached one until now. He really missed outside, you could tell by the mournful expression that echoed in his eyes when he stared outside the window. Sasuke approached the blonde and pointed outside. You want to go? He frowned, not understanding. What? Taking the blonde's hand, he led him to the back door and opened it. Go? He asked again, stepping outside. Carefully the blonde followed, his blue eyes shimmering in the sunlight and his hair glowing a vibrant yellow. He breathed deep the fresh air and began running through the meadow, staring up at the sun and smiling. He turned back to Sasuke and pointed at the ground. What? He asked. Grass. What? Pointing at the sun. Sun. And it went on. They walked through the field, Naruto asking and Sasuke identifying, most of the day. When supper came, Sasuke led Naruto back to the house, though the blonde was quite upset about having to leave the outdoors once again, but he followed Sasuke anyways. Yo, Kakashi said when the two of them came in. Kakashi-sensei. Sasuke nodded as he closed the door with a sulking Naruto in tow. What's wrong? He asked, pointing at Naruto. He doesn't want to come inside. Sasuke shrugged. Well, I brought someone to meet him, with Hokage-sama's approval, of course. Sakura? He asked flatly, not looking forward to seeing the girl again. He hadn't enjoyed his week off from training, but dealing with two annoying people would be too much for him. Nope, Kakashi said and led them towards the living room where a scarred ninja in a ponytail stood. The blonde's interest piqued, and he looked over Sasuke's shoulder, pointing at the Chunin. What? No, Sasuke said. No? Who? What? No. Who? He pointed at the scarred ninja and said, who? Then he pointed at the couch and said, what? Naruto frowned, but pointed at the Chunin and said, who? Sasuke nodded and then answered, Iruka-sensei. I'm not your sensei anymore, Sasuke-kun. Iruka answered, but he smiled anyways and approached Naruto. Hello? He said, but Naruto shrank back, uncertain why the ninja was coming so close to him. No, he said, retreating a couple steps. Iruka looked at Kakashi in confusion. What's wrong? I'm not certain. Naruto? Iruka asked lowly. Do you remember me? The blonde frowned. No, he said forcefully. Kitsune. Kitsune, Kitsune, Kitsune. He looked at Sasuke. Sasuke, then at Kakashi, Kakashi, and then at himself, Kitsune. The Chunin nodded, whispering, Gomen, Kitsune. He knelt down and looked at the blonde-haired boy he hadn't seen in 8 years and smiled. Iruka. Slowly the blonde approached him, his eyes showing a vague flicker of recognition, yet he couldn't remember who he was. Iruka, he repeated, pointing at him. Do you remember me? He asked. Naruto frowned and turned to look at Sasuke. Who? He rolled his eyes, dope. He muttered but shook his head at Iruka. He doesn't understand that much yet. Iruka looked crestfallen, but smiled at the blonde and just nodded. Kitsune. Naruto beamed, nodding vigorously. Hi. He then looked at Sasuke, wanting to know if he said it right. Sasuke nodded and Naruto grinned. Iruka-sensei, how is it you know him? Sighing, the scarred ninja stood back up, looking fondly at the blonde, and turned to answer Sasuke's question. Before Naruto was taken away, I was his caretaker. I'm the one who taught him everything he knows before Kyuubi's instincts took over. I was hoping he'd remember me and maybe bring back some of his memories. He's been alone for 8 years, Kakashi pointed out, and only using the basic instincts to survive. Most likely his memories of before then are very vague. Hi, you're right. Iruka sighed. But I still can't believe he's alive. He smiled as the blonde frowned at the conversation above his vocabulary. Well now, why don't I cook dinner? Sasuke nodded. Kitsune, come, he said, heading up the stairs to wash their faces and hands and change Naruto's clothes. The blonde dobe had found a stream while they were out and jumped into it, soaking his pants. Naruto followed obediently and pouted when Sasuke handed him another pair of lounge pants, but he understood what was wanted. He still didn't understand the second skin completely, but he now knew it would not hurt to remove or affect him in any way, so he wore them. He did have to admit they did keep him warmer, but the other skin, he didn't like that one. It restricted his arms and he didn't like it one bit. After he was cleaned up, Sasuke led him back towards the dining room, but Naruto sniffed the air and immediately his eyes brightened. He knew that smell and it always excited him. Before Sasuke could stop him, Naruto bolted down the stairs to the table, perching in his seat and waiting. Sasuke sighed. At least he understood sitting at the table, sort of. That had taken 3 days of withholding food and scolding the blonde, and he was pleased to know he didn't have to do that anymore, at least. The yowling, whimpering, begging and growling during those days gave him a constant headache, and he had to watch the blonde closely since he now understood how to open the refrigerator. Iruka smiled at the anxious blonde and set down a plate in front of him as the other 2 ninjas appeared into the dining room, their food already laid out. Sasuke watched closely as Iruka sat down next to the blonde and tried to help him use chopsticks instead of his hands. Naruto tried to copy the movements, but he didn't like how little he could eat with them and finally snapped the chopsticks in half. No. He pouted. The Chunin sighed and let Naruto eat how he wanted to, wolfing down the food as if it were his last meal and then eyeing everyone else's plate. Sasuke sighed. It was always the same this entire week. He couldn't stop Naruto's quick eating or his watching everyone else eat. Iruka noticed Naruto's hungry eyes on his plate and looked at Sasuke and Kakashi questioningly. Why is he doing that? He asked. Naruto thinks like a fox, remember? He thinks every meal will be his last, and so he eats as much as he can. He still hasn't learned that he'll continue to have food. He still thinks day to day, nothing about the future or the past unless it's a lesson he's learned. Kakashi said. Already he's been storing food under his bed for later. It's instinct. Sasuke looked up in surprise. He's storing food in my house, he growled, glaring at the blonde who shrunk back uncertain of what he'd done. Don't worry, it's just apples and grapes, nothing that will go bad yet. It's just a reaction he has. He's a scavenger, it's why he eats so much, and why he hides food so other animals won't steal his food. He wasn't happy, but he returned to his food, still glaring at the blonde, and remained silent for the rest of the meal. After supper, Iruka cleaned up with Naruto trailing him expectantly. He wanted more food and there was still food on the plates. Yet to his horror, Iruka began throwing the food into a bag and then washing the plates. Naruto gaped and darted out to find Sasuke. Sasuke, he said once he found the stoic ninja sitting on the couch. Sasuke. What? Sasuke asked, surprised to see the horrified look on Naruto's face. Go. Go. He said, pulling at Sasuke's sleeve. Sasuke stood up and followed Naruto to the kitchen where Iruka was drying the plates. What? Sasuke repeated as Naruto whimpered and continued to pull at his sleeve. He finally dragged Sasuke over to the trash can and pointed at the food lying in the trash can. No, he said. Sasuke sighed. No? Naruto, thinking he agreed with him, nodded and wanted to take the food out, but Sasuke slapped his hand. No. When the blonde continued to look horrified, Sasuke opened the refrigerator and handed Naruto an apple as compensation. The blonde took it and rolled it around in his hands. What? Apple, he said. Yours. He frowned. What? Sasuke pointed at the apple and then at Naruto. Yours. He grabbed another apple and pointed to himself. Mine. Then pointing back at Naruto's apple, he said again, yours. Naruto pointed at himself. Yours. No. He frowned. What? Sighing, Sasuke tried again. Yours. And then pointing at his again. Mine. Then he took Naruto's hand and pointed at the apple in his hand and then at the blonde. Mine. Naruto frowned and bit at his lip before pointing at Sasuke's apple and Sasuke and saying, yours? Hi. Then at his own and saying, mine. Hi. Slightly smirking. The blonde beamed and then ran to hide his apple where no one could steal it. Sasuke sighed and put his apple back into the refrigerator while Iruka chuckled. So, no wasting food, I presume? No, he's horrified at the prospect. Sasuke answered in a tired voice. Well, Sasuke-kun, I'll take care of Naruto, you go ahead and get cleaned up and go to sleep. Not even protesting, the stoic ninja nodded and headed to his room, taking a long shower and collapsing into his bed, with a sigh. The blonde was going to be the death of him, and it had only been a week. Iruka tucked the blonde into bed and ruffled his blonde spikes. Good night, Kitsune, he said, leaning down to kiss the blonde's forehead. He frowned, not understanding the kiss, but knowing it was familiar, and closed his eyes tight, whimpering. An AR Kitsune? Iruka asked, sitting beside him and stroking his face. What? He opened his eyes and asked, pointing to where Iruka kissed him. Kiss, Iruka said, kissing his forehead again. Naruto sighed and nodded, curling up into a ball and closing his eyes once more to sleep. Iruka looked down at him fondly and patted his shoulder once before leaving. He paused by the door and whispered, "Good night, Naruto." Dream/flashback. So Naruto, are you happy to leave Konoha? Kenji asked. The 5-year-old shook his head. Iruka-san, he whispered, hiding his face in his hands. Don't worry, Kenji smiled, wrapping his arm around Naruto's shoulder. I'm certain Iruka will visit, but you know it's dangerous to stay in Konoha and we just want to protect you. But why? He asked, sniffing. A ninja does not cry, so no crying, Naruto-kun. But I don't want to leave. I know you don't, but there are people in Konoha who want to hurt you, little one, and so we're taking you somewhere else. Why? Kenji smiled down softly at him. I wish I could tell you. Will we ever go back? Maybe one day, but not until you're older and can protect yourself. I miss Iruka-san, Naruto whispered. Why can't he come? Kenji tilted his head up and traced the whisker marks on Naruto's cheek. He just started his teaching position, Naruto-kun, and as much as he wanted to come, he can't until the year is finished. I miss him too, but you'll be strong for Iruka, right? You'll be strong for him. The blonde nodded, strong. That's a good boy, now up on my back. Break's over, let's move, he ordered, and the 12 ninjas accompanying them quickly grabbed their packs and followed Kenji through the forest. Watch out! Someone yelled. Dream/flashback. Naruto awoke from his dream with a broken cry, sitting up. He was shivering and his skin was covered in sweat. He whimpered and crawled out of bed, dragging his blanket with him. Slowly, he went to Sasuke's room and tugged at the door, but it was locked. He tugged again, whimpering louder, and scratched at it. Sasuke quickly opened the door and Naruto immediately darted into his room, still shaking. Kitsune? He asked, watching as the blonde paced his room, dragging his blanket behind him. Who? The blonde finally asked. Who? Sasuke repeated, trying to understand. He whimpered again and shook his head. Sighing, Sasuke took his hand. Come on, back to bed. He began back towards the room, but when he reached the door, Naruto whimpered and dug his feet in. No, he said, shaking more. Sasuke eyed the blonde and then looked into the room. Nothing was there, but Naruto was obviously distressed. He looked at the large eyes darting around nervously and sighed. A nightmare. He had a nightmare. He muttered and led Naruto back to his room. He laid out Naruto's blanket on the floor next to his bed and pointed at it. Sleep. Naruto frowned, but he did lay down as Sasuke slid back into his bed. He whimpered again, but closed his eyes and tried to sleep once more as Sasuke watched him. 2 hours later, Naruto finally fell asleep and Sasuke followed soon after, both of them exhausted from the day and both fighting their own nightmares. Naruto sniffed his food. Humans were so odd. They cooked their meat, drawing it of the warm red liquid and filling the taste with smoke and charcoal. They refused to eat their meat raw, unless it was fish wrapped in seaweed and rice, and refused him to eat his meat raw as well. He liked his meat full of flavor and warm with blood, but the humans were appalled by it. Pouting, he looked down at the food before him and wrinkled his nose in disgust. At first he had loved the human cooking, it was so different and new, but after a month of these odd meals, he craved the hunt. He missed the rush of adrenaline as he ran through the woods, the feel of the wind upon his face, the scent of prey heavy in the air, and the rush of pride when his claws and fangs tore into warm flesh. This bland, smoky meat before him was tough, dry, and without the satisfaction that came with the hunt. He picked up the 2 sticks next to him and fitted them to his hand, something he still struggled with. He didn't understand why humans were so persistent about using these thin sticks instead of their claws to eat. Claws were easier, more efficient, and quicker than using 2 small sticks. He carefully picked up a piece of meat, learning after many trials that he had to be slow lest the meat fall, and took a bite. Fire engulfed his mouth and he hissed at the spicy meat, clawing to get the remnants out of his mouth. He threw the sticks to the ground and coughed at the burning spices. Kitsune? Iruka asked. It had taken a month for the 3 shinobi to stop bringing up the name Naruto around him, and even now Iruka still slipped. Don't like, he said with his limited vocabulary. Don't like? Iruka persisted while Sasuke just scowled at the blonde for interrupting his supper and Kakashi just continued to eat. Naruto pointed at his food. No. You have to eat. The blonde knew that phrase well and huffed. No. Kitsune. Iruka warned, staring down at the 13-year-old boy. No. Sasuke growled from across the table, eat damn it and shut up. Naruto snarled in response and stormed away from the table, taking his normal seat next to the window. Ravenhair might be his superior, but that didn't mean he had to follow every order, just show him respect. The words damn it and shut up he didn't quite comprehend, but Ravenhair's disposition was hostile, as always. Sighing, he stared out the window. He wanted to go out, but he was only allowed outside from when the sun rose to when it sat 3 hands in the sky. And even then a human had to be with him. Staring at the setting sun, he raised his eyes to follow the lone bird flying above him, free. A small yawl escaped his throat, and he settled his face on the windowsill, staring longingly at the freedom he had once had flying above him. Iruka stared at Naruto's retreated back and frowned, his eyes filling with worry. What's wrong with the meat this time? He asked the silent table. Living with a stoic boy, a feral boy and a perverted jounin was anything but easy, but Hokage-sama had placed him back as Naruto's guardian, meaning he had to live with Iruka. But Naruto refused to leave Sasuke for long, and the spacious apartment the teacher lived in was too small for a hyperactive fox boy. So now the 4 of them were living together, much to Sasuke's chagrin, and trying to find a way for all 4 of them to live their lives normally. Yet everything had changed since Naruto had come. Sasuke used to get up at 5 each morning, but now he got up at 6 because Naruto kept them all up later. Sasuke still trained each morning, but with Naruto tailing him, trying to copy him and ruining most of his workout. Iruka awoke an hour later than Sasuke and began breakfast every morning, making certain both boys ate at least something and waking Kakashi up at 11. That alone took an hour. If the silver jounin didn't have 3 cups of coffee in the morning, he wouldn't be able to function, and just getting him out of bed took a half hour or longer. The scarred ninja had taken up to cleaning the house, teaching his classes as well as teaching Naruto the language and how to act civilized. By the time 9 came, the poor teacher was completely exhausted, putting Naruto to sleep up to Sasuke. Kakashi was gone most of the day, out training Sakura alone, on missions or teaching Sasuke separately. They didn't want to introduce another person just yet, especially since Naruto was having a hard enough time understanding them. With Sakura's constant talking, the fox boy would be overwhelmed. Every day was different with Naruto. Sometimes it was good and sometimes it wasn't so good. There were days that were entertaining as Naruto learned something new or found an amazing contraption, like the folding cot. The fox boy had spent hours folding it and unfolding it and jumping on it and inspecting it while they just watched. Then there were days like when Naruto had discovered just how sharp a knife could be, slicing his hand wide open, or when he had dropped one of Sasuke's kunais on his foot. Iruka sighed, remembering trying to calm the snarling, spitting and hissing boy down long enough to wrap the wounds, which had disappeared within minutes of being wrapped. The blonde still refused to wear a shirt or shoes. He didn't like them, but at Iruka's insistence, he had taken to wearing the pants consistently. He had done that by withholding food from the blonde until he wore his pants, but that caused a lot of howling and ringing ears. Sasuke huffed and returned to the meal before him. He couldn't care less what was wrong with the meal this time, at least nothing got broken this time. Naruto had a habit that when he didn't like someone to push the plate either on the ground or away, usually breaking something. He picked up another piece of steak and chewed it slowly. At least there was one good thing about having 4 idiots living in his house: Iruka-sensei could cook. He had never really learned how to, sticking usually to whatever he had in bland meats. He liked this, though he wouldn't admit that. He had already tried to get them out of his house, asking Hokage-sama to please to let him have his house back. But the old man adamantly refused, saying his mansion was large and secluded enough to keep the village from knowing about Naruto, and keep the troublesome blonde out of trouble. Sasuke had tried again once Iruka was listed as Naruto's guardian to get them out of his house, but the Hokage still refused. He said Sasuke needed someone else living with him there, and that a 12-year-old boy never should be living alone. So, against both Kakashi's and Sasuke's wishes, Hokage-sama listed Kakashi as Sasuke's guardian. Looking at his so-called guardian, Sasuke scowled. The lazy jounin was too laid back to be worth anything, though he was teaching Sasuke how to fight and a more efficient way to use his chakra. Only the 4 of them knew what Kakashi looked like beneath the mask. The silver shinobi couldn't keep his mask on every second of the day, and had finally taken off, revealing absolutely nothing. There was nothing wrong with the teacher at all, and yet he always wore that damn mask. When Sasuke had asked, Kakashi smiled and said he had taken to wearing it during missions to keep smoke out of his mouth, but that he had began to wear it constantly to just make people wonder. Sasuke just snorted and walked away. It was such a stupid reason. Kakashi hummed a small tune while eating, his mask lying on his knee. He couldn't say he enjoyed being Sasuke's guardian. The boy was too serious and too like him when he was younger for comfort, but he wasn't about to go against the Hokage. And he knew he didn't have to worry about Sasuke getting into trouble like Naruto, but the silence the black-haired ninja held was unnerving. He was hard to read, hard to understand, and those calculating eyes could send shivers down anyone's spine. He had already finished eating, loving how great a cook Iruka was. If it was just him and Sasuke, there'd be a problem because neither of them could cook. Yet he also couldn't understand what Naruto didn't like about the food this time, but the blonde was having many problems lately. Almost everything they cooked he didn't like. He continued to stare outside. He had horrible nightmares almost every night, and would get this faraway look in his eyes at times as if remembering something he had once had. Looking at the untouched plate, his eyes scanned the meat, and he suddenly understood. It's too spicy. He drawled as if it was nothing interesting. The teacher looked up. What? The meat, it's spicy, that's why he doesn't like it. He smiled. Understanding dawned on him. Oh. Looking over to where the blonde was sitting, he sighed. He used to like spicy foods. Before he was lost. We still don't know what happened. Iruka sighed. And the only survivor can't speak and tell us. Hi. Naruto huffed. The full moon was out and the night was calling to him, and he couldn't go. Pacing the room, he fiddled with his hands, trying to ignore how much he wanted to be outside and knowing he couldn't. Dobe, stop that. Sasuke snapped, sitting on his bed. The blonde had taken to sleeping in his room. He wouldn't sleep elsewhere unless Sasuke was near, and so now the two boys were stuck in the room together with Naruto pacing in front of him. Snarling, Naruto stomped over to the window and stared longingly at the moon. The humans couldn't understand. They didn't understand what he felt, the pull of the night that called all nocturnal animals. He had ignored it for a month. He could no longer ignore its call. He needed to get out of this enclosed shelter and feel the wind, breathe the clean air, hunt and explore the woods once more. Sasuke snorted and fell back onto his bed, his hands above his head, and closed his eyes. The damn blonde had ruined everything. First his house was taken away, then his silence, then his life, then his own freedom, and now his damn room. Since the first week, Naruto wouldn't sleep anywhere except in Sasuke's room, at the foot of his bed or before the door. It didn't matter to the blonde as long as Sasuke was there. It was true that Sasuke understood Naruto better than anyone else. He understood the blonde's moods, the way he carried himself, the snarls, the yowls and spitting and hissing that was a constant with him, and he understood what Naruto wanted as he looked out the window. What Iruka and the other adults refused, both of them. He knew it was coming before it came. He could tell by how silent Naruto had fallen, and he sat up just in time to see Naruto's fist flying through the window, shattering it for the second time this month. The blonde had learned from his first experience jumping through the window, and this time slid onto the roof and down to the ground with inhuman grace. Shit! Sasuke growled, sliding out of the bed to follow the blonde. If he left to get Iruka or Kakashi, Naruto would be gone by the time they were ready to follow him, and Naruto was somehow his responsibility because he had found him. Sliding barefoot to the ground, Sasuke caught a glimpse of the blonde making a beeline towards the forest and followed. The night wasn't cold, but the breeze that blew through Sasuke's hair sent shivers down his spine. A clear sky full of stars and the full moon lit the dark forest, casting shadows and causing the setting to seem even fuller of life than it was. Yet Naruto didn't seem to notice any of this as he rushed gracefully through the forest, jumping over fallen trees and sliding and dodging the branches blocking his path. His graceful movements made Sasuke's look blocky and slow, as if he had never done this before in his life, and he was slowly losing sight of the blonde. Odd, the fox boy was the only sun-kissed blonde he knew with vibrant blue eyes. He stuck out like a sore thumb, but in the forest he blended in as if he belonged. Naruto stopped and let out a couple yips, looking over his shoulder at Sasuke. No, he said, his eyes different from before. They were still blue, but there was something different about them, something calculating and intelligent within them. What? Sasuke asked. There was no way the dobe was going to refuse him to follow. Yet the look in Naruto's eyes wasn't one of annoyance or even anger, it was one of fear. He saw the blonde struggling for the words and waited patiently as the blonde scrunched his face in concentration and growled with frustration. Don't eat. No. Sasuke, no, don't eat. Don't eat? He asked, confused. Snarling, Naruto rushed at him and pushed him out of the way as a large snake snapped his jaws inches from his face. The two boys rolled across the ground while the snake tried to follow them. Naruto pushed off the ground and faced the snake head-on, snarling and showing his fangs. Sasuke jumped beside him and reached for his kunai, but he had left his holster in his room. Fuck, he whispered, looking into the dark eyes of the snake slithering towards him. All he had were his jutsus, and most of them he couldn't use surrounded by trees and close to the blonde. Naruto hissed and spit at him, walking slowly towards him as if the snake was naught but a small bug. The snake lunged, but Naruto's quick reflexes kept him from getting bit as he swiped his claws across the scaly face. The snake pulled back, shaking its large head at the sting of those razor-sharp claws. Fox claws. Sasuke stared at the blonde. When the hell did those nails of his become so sharp? Or for that matter, when had his whiskers become darker? He watched as Naruto dodged the snake's lunges, missing those fangs by inches as he continued to inflict wound after wound on the large creature. The snake's beady eyes suddenly focused on Sasuke, and before either of them could react, lunged at the stoic ninja. Sasuke gasped and rolled out of the way, but the snake caught him by the leg, biting deep into his calf. Sasuke yelled in pain and tried to pull out of the snake's mouth, but the snake clamped down harder and drew Sasuke into the air. Naruto snarled angrily and fell into a crouch on the ground, his eyes calculating his enemy. Sasuke was his superior, his to protect, and this snake was taking away what was his. He dug his claws into the ground and gritted his teeth at the sudden burst of power welling within his body. He hated that vile feeling every time this happened, but it had saved his life many a times. Sasuke gripped his caught leg with both hands, his breath catching as he knew what would happen next. The snake was poisonous, he could already feel the venom flowing in his veins, his leg already numb, and it wouldn't be long before his body followed. He turned his eyes to his charge and stared at what was once Naruto. The bloodthirsty look in those red eyes, not blue, not innocent and uncomprehending, no, these eyes were the eyes of a killer, a vicious killer, and they didn't look like Naruto at all. He could sense the red chakra flowing in him, red, blood red, just like those cold, unnerving eyes. It wasn't human, and the claws the blonde was sporting wasn't human either. With an inhuman yell, Naruto charged towards the snake, jumping up to the snake's neck and sinking his claws into the tough skin. That shouldn't be possible. To sink fingernails into scales, Sasuke knew it wasn't possible, and yet Naruto just did. The snake shuddered with pain, but didn't drop his prey. The fox boy cut, sliced, punctured and ripped at the tough hide all the way down until his feet touched the ground. He snarled again and sent out a wave of overwhelming power. The snake, knowing he was beat and dying, dropped Sasuke from his jaws and slithered away, bleeding tremendously as he went. Naruto knew the snake wouldn't get far before it died. The wounds were too deep, and even if it did survive the initial attack, the wounds would get infected and kill it that way instead. The overload of chakra left his body, and Naruto felt his strength leave him like it always did after one of these bouts. He fell to his knees, his energy leaving him as his claws shrinking back to normal, his whisker marks fading until they were only small, thin black lines, his canines returning to their elongated, but dulled, shape, and his eyes slowly fading into sky blue once more. Sweat poured down his face as he struggled for control. He could feel the creature within him struggling against its bonds for supremacy, trying to break free and show it was the dominant mind. The creature scared him. He knew what it was and who it was, but why it was within him he did not understand. The creature taught him everything he knew about life: how to hunt, how to walk, how to fight, how to understand the creatures of the forest, and how to live. It was because of him that he had survived this long, and he knew the great fox was the dominant mind, but he also knew that he could never release the thing within him. He knew if he ever did, then his life and the lives of the forest, everything he loved, would be destroyed. He looked 10 feet from him and focused on the fallen body there. Ravenhair, the stoic boy hadn't understood when he warned him. With his limited vocabulary, he couldn't warn Ravenhair not to come towards him or move. Snakes picked up on scent and movement. At the time, Sasuke was downwind, but closer to the snake, and if he had just stayed where he was, the snake wouldn't have attacked him. The large, venomous snake would have come towards Naruto, where he could have killed it and been satisfied with the hunt. But the human had followed him and had put both of them in danger, and now both of them were without energy, or a defense. Snarling, he dragged himself over towards his superior and looked down at the stoic ninja, waiting for something from the boy. "Sasuke," he whispered, his voice tired and weak. Sasuke slowly looked up. He could feel the venom taking effect. His body had grown heavy and his right leg was numb from the venom. The pulsating feeling going through his body was the venom spreading slowly through his veins, shutting down his body one system at a time. He knew it well. Poisons had been a side study of his. First it would be his muscles, he wouldn't be able to move, then it would be his nerves, he wouldn't be able to feel anymore, then it would be his sight and salivating at the mouth, and last it would his lungs. His lungs would paralyze and he'd stop breathing and die. Looking up, he focused his eyes on the figure above him, looming and calling his name in a weak voice. He saw blue eyes glinting in the night, and knew whatever had been Naruto minutes before was gone, and the fox boy was his odd self again. Staring up at him, Sasuke took a shallow breath. The fall to the ground had been a good 30 feet, and from the angle he was dropped, he couldn't break his fall well. He knew his left wrist was broken, he was pretty certain a couple ribs were at least cracked, and of course he was unable to use his right leg. The rest of his body went numb and his sight began to blur. Naruto's shadow began to blend in with the background and dim. His head dropped to the side and he could see the saliva coming from his mouth. He couldn't feel it, but he could still see it pooling on the ground, foaming as a result of the venom. His breathing became shallower and more sporadic as the venom began spreading into his lungs. He heard Naruto give a yelp of surprise just before silver hair and gray eyes looked down at him. Kakashi-sensei was here. He had found them. For once he was thankful to have someone for a guardian, someone cared enough about him to go and find him when the two of them had disappeared. The silver ninja knelt down and picked Sasuke off the ground as the last of his consciousness began to fade. "We need to get to Hokage-sama," Kakashi said to someone, but Sasuke couldn't hear who it was. Everything spiraled into black and left him wondering who else he was talking to and what about Naruto. Sasuke groaned, reflexively stretching his sore muscles as he opened his eyes, quickly closing them again when the light blinded him. With one hand over his eyes, he blinked back tears and squinted up at the bright light coming from above him. He slowly moved his hand down to his side and propped himself up on one elbow, looking around the white room. White room, hospital, doctors, nurses, fawning, fangirls, gifts, torture. Groaning again, he let his head fall back on the flat pillow and stared up at the white tiled drop ceiling. The stupid ceiling with its styrofoam tiles that he would count 423 times before he was finally released from the hospital if he didn't slip out now. Looking at the 4 in his right arm covered in tape, Sasuke gripped the base of the needle and pulled it out, clenching his teeth at the burning he felt rushing up his arm. He slid out of the bed, his muscles protesting painfully, and stumbled towards the window. How long had he been out anyway? He was just beginning to open the window when the room began to spin and he felt his feet slipping from beneath him. His arms instinctively moved to stop the fall before he hit his head on the ground, but he was unconscious by the time his body met the floor. Shit, was the one thought going through his mind as he regained consciousness. Not only did his muscles still ache, but now his back, neck and head were sore. Opening his eyes, he stared up at large sky-blue eyes 2 inches away from his face. Sasuke snarled at Naruto, who just cocked his head, his whisker marks wrinkling as the fox boy frowned down at Sasuke. The blonde boy was practically laying on top of him, with his ass sitting on Sasuke's stomach, his legs bent and straddling his waist, his hands planted just under his armpits, and the upper portion of his body hovering over his. "Well, this is interesting," someone said, and both boys looked up at the silver-haired Jounin. "Yo." Growling, Sasuke pushed Naruto off of him. "Get off." The blonde huffed as he stood up and retreated to the window. "Team," he muttered under his breath, not looking at Sasuke or Kakashi. Sasuke slowly picked himself up off the ground, darkly scowling at the fox boy, and turned to look at his sensei. "What happened?" he demanded. "You were attacked by a snake, the poison almost killed you, you were in a coma for about 2 months and now you're awake," Kakashi said with a yawn. His eyes widened. 2 months? Hi. Naruto grunted and turned around, long healing. He frowned, trying to think of the words. Snake bad, hurt Sasuke, but Sasuke strong. The blonde looked at Kakashi, silently asking if he spoke correctly. Strong was his new word. The lazy Jounin nodded. Yup. Right, Naruto, you're getting better every day. He suddenly noticed Naruto's guardian wasn't around. Where's Iruka? Home, the blonde said, looking slightly remorseful. Kakashi groaned, not again. Come on, Sasuke needs to rest anyway, and I know Iruka is going out of his mind with worry by now. Naruto cocked his head, out of mind? It's a saying. Sasuke out of mind? At hearing his name, Sasuke scowled at the blonde. No, I'm not out of my mind, he snapped. If anyone is, it's you. Now, Sasuke, you still need to rest and you better remain here or I'll stop all our missions until I think you're fit to go out again, he said cheerfully, and as your guardian, your well-being comes first. So missions in about 3 months sounds about right. Sasuke gaped. You can't. I'm your guardian, Sasuke, I can if I want. Then dragging the confused blonde out of the door, Kakashi left his charge alone in the room to rest. Disgruntled, Sasuke climbed back into bed and brooded, thinking of the most painful ways he could kill Kakashi from making him bedridden and putting him through the torture of fangirls and nurses. Oh, his guardian would pay. Naruto sighed and followed the lazy Jounin in front of him. He didn't like this place, it was too crowded, too easy to be taken by surprise and too noisy. He winced as his sensitive ears picked up the yells and screams of the people hundreds of feet away from him. The noise was even worse close to him. Everywhere he turned there were bodies, curious eyes staring at him as he trialed the silver-haired ninja in front of him, and words he couldn't understand being called out. He frowned at the odd language. In 2 months he had gained a lot of understanding about the humans he lived with, along with finally accepting the name Naruto. Scarnose had explained to him that his real name would scare the humans and to accept Naruto as a nickname. Only in their burrow would he refuse that name and demand to be called Kitsune. He was Fox, and no matter what shape he may be, he knew he would always be Fox. He watched as Silver Moon walked towards their den and looked away as Scarnose came running from the den like a mother. He didn't understand it. Females were supposed to fawn over their offspring, not males, and yet Scarnose acted more like a mother than a father. Naruto! I told you not to run off! He scolded, standing before the annoyed blonde. He was with Sasuke again, though how he got past everyone is beyond me, Silver Moon said. You mean, got past you and it's quite easy when you're sleeping. Ah, don't be so mean, Irika. He whined. I knew where he was heading the whole time and I thought you were with him. Don't give me that. You're teaching him to be just as bad as you two, always slipping out the window. Do you think he's not watching? Irika. And what about those books? I saw you trying to teach him to read by having him look at one of your perverted books. They're really good stories and... Good stories. How can you say reading about sex at his age are good stories? But... I don't want to hear another word. Both of you inside, right now. Scarnose ordered. Naruto growled lowly, but he knew to follow the elder's orders. He understood somewhat the difference between a superior and an elder with humans. In his world, anyone who was stronger than him was his superior and there were no elders, but here anyone who was his elder was also his superior. He didn't like the hierarchy with humans. There was some semblance of one, but then those with no strength were also his superiors in some way because they were elders. Trudging inside, he flopped down by the window once more and looked outside. He had even taken to wearing the human second skin clothes they called them, and even sandals which restricted his reactions. But Scarnose had said the humans outside would be frightened to see him walking around barefoot and naked, and so he wasn't allowed to if he wanted to go outside. Irika sighed as he closed the door. What a hectic 2 months without the stoic ninja to entertain the blonde throughout the day. Naruto had ran the two ninjas into the ground with his hyperactivity and questions. The blonde awoke at 4 or 5 am every morning, immediately demanding breakfast and attention. If no one got up, he'd go out and catch his own breakfast to eat raw. So every morning at 4, Irika got up and made the blonde breakfast, and then the real fun began. He had taken off from teaching at the academy at least until Naruto could understand the basics of what he was, a ninja. So, therefore, he was in charge of teaching the blonde language, mathematics, ninjutsu, history and all the basics of a ninja. Naruto surprisingly caught on quick to the language. Though he refused to learn how to write, he couldn't see the reason for it, but he picked up on words the people around him said. Mathematics he didn't see a reason to either, but Irika tried anyway, at least to teach him the basics of math. He knew addition and subtraction, but multiplication and higher he refused to even try. History had very little meaning to him since he lived day to day and the day before was just another day he survived, but he did listen, sometimes, and learn about the place he lived and humans. Ninjutsu, as both teachers were surprised, he was quite good at. He understood the weapons, how to hold them, how to throw them, and he already knew how to fight and defend. He could even almost hold his own with Irika. There was no doubt in his mind that when Naruto grew up, he would be a great ninja, if he had the patience. But that was the main problem with the blonde, he had no patience. When he wanted to do something, he wanted to do it now and not wait. He didn't understand waiting, it seemed, and wanted to do what he wanted when he wanted, not when it was acceptable. That included when he wanted to disappear into the night as well as disappear to explore the streets of Konoha, putting Irika through a lot of stress as well as awkward situations. Flashback. Irika stared open-mouthed at was, at one time, a market. Now it was just a mess of feathers, knocked over tables, smashed fruit and angry villagers glaring at a confused Naruto. The blonde fox was crouched down in the midst of the mist, one arm caught in some rope and one leg stuck beneath a wreckage of wood and 4 angry vendors advancing on the blonde. Naruto began to yell, pulling against the rope and trying to break free as the vendors advanced. If he didn't stop struggling, Irika knew he would break his wrist or worse, permanently lose his hand. Wait! Irika yelled, making his way through the throng of observers to Naruto's side. The 4 vendors stopped and watched as Irika approached the yowling fox, struggling to get free and run away. It's all right, he whispered calmly. Just calm down and I'll help you. Not understanding, Naruto continued to struggle, his panic causing his chakra to spark erratically. Irika hissed as an array of chakra was released, making the people around him scream with shock and panic as Naruto's chakra continued to release in all directions. Irika was able to block most of them, But if Naruto didn't stop soon, he would seriously be hurt, and he didn't even want to think of the villagers who couldn't protect themselves. The sly blonde had snuck out right beneath both their noses, and Irika had thought he was heading towards the hospital. He could follow Sasuke's scent, but then this mess happened. Most likely he had gotten confused and turned around and ended up destroying the market in fear. "Calm down," he said again, trying to keep his voice calm. Naruto wailed as he continued to pull on rope holding him down. Irika finally grabbed him around the waist and held him against his body, holding him firmly in place. "Shushu, just calm down, Kitsune, calm down," he whispered over and over, holding tightly to his charge until the erratic chakra finally slowed and ceased. Irika looked down at tear-filled blue eyes, confusion and fear evident on the whiskered face. Very slowly, Irika untangled the mess of rope so Naruto could see everything he was doing and then moved his leg out from under the pile of wood. Naruto tried to stand, but fell back to his knees when his right leg wouldn't respond. The Chunin knelt down and picked him up, keeping Naruto close to his side, the villagers slowly coming out of hiding to see what had happened. But when they looked, there was only a mess in the road and not a single strand of blonde hair. Irika had rushed Naruto to the Hokage. It had only been a week since the snake incident. They had gathered from Naruto's hands motions that it was a snake, and when they showed him a picture, the feral boy had hissed at the picture and nodded. Yet what they still couldn't grasp was how both boys were still alive. Sasuke was the worst off. The snake had bitten him in the right leg and the poisons running through his body sent him into a stable coma. But it was Naruto who was the mystery. When he and Kakashi had arrived, the Jounin had immediately rushed to Sasuke's side, the brunette obviously the most hurt. But when Irika had turned to Naruto, who had backed away, he couldn't find a single scratch on him, and yet the blonde boy was undoubtedly tired and ragged. Even after taking the two boys to the Hokage and removing the poison from Sasuke's body, were the three of them unable to understand exactly what had happened and why Naruto remained unharmed. End of flashback. Irika looked over at his charge, his slim frame glowing in the growing dusk. In the 2 months he had cared for the blonde alone, Naruto had filled out, and yet still remained lithe as well as muscular. The fox boy had come a long way from the scrawny, half-dead child from 2 months ago. He was smarter, stronger, and learning at such a quick pace that he would soon be caught up with the other genin, though in truth, Naruto wasn't even a ninja. He fought like a fox, claws and fangs bared, the killer instinct evident in his eyes and his moves. God, could the boy move? Neither he nor Kakashi could understand where he learned to move as he did, but he was so graceful and so dangerous. He disappears from sight to return seconds later from any side. He had no pattern. He chose the weakest area in the fight and attacked it. He hunted like a fox, a predator, searching and revealing the weakest point of his prey and bringing it down. He still couldn't best either of them, but he had dealt them quite a few lucky hits and left his mark. His moves were so erratic as well that he couldn't follow him, though Kakashi still hadn't used his eye yet, but he didn't think it would be long before the lazy Jounin was forced to. Sighing again, he walked up to the blonde fox and clapped his hand on the boy's shoulder. The only reaction he received was a small snarl and a glance before Naruto returned to looking outside. "You want to go?" "Yes," he growled. "Moon," he paused, his eyes rising to stare at the barely noticeable moon. "Yowls." He finally decided. He remembered hearing that word earlier. "Calls?" Irika suggested. "The moon is telling you go to outside. Calling you out?" Naruto nodded. "Moon calls. Hunt." "But you have no reason to hunt anymore." "What?" "You don't need to hunt anymore." His eyes narrowed. "Must hunt." "Why?" The blonde shifted uncomfortably, turning around to look up at his guardian. "My way." Then added, "His way," while pointing at his stomach. "Calls, must out of mind if don't." Sighing, Irika nodded. He understood somewhat what the blonde was talking about. It was his way. He needed to hunt because it was how he was raised, and to be locked inside so much really did make him even harder to handle. He didn't like enclosed spaces, he didn't like crowded streets, he didn't like wasting food, and he didn't like not being able to hunt. Last time they had tried to keep him inside without going out once for almost 2 weeks, the blonde had destroyed his room, Sasuke's room as well as the living room. He would always be agitated, lashing out at anyone who touched him or startled him, and would continuously pace the entire mansion, staring outside and trying to find a way out. When they finally let him out, Naruto disappeared for a fortnight and returned bloody, dirty, smelly and smiling. After that they began letting him wander when he wanted, but only into the woods and only for 2 days at the most. He was still a liability to Konoha, and the stability of his mind and control over Kyuubi was still unknown. It was still disturbing the way Kyuubi forced his chakra through Naruto's body to heal any wounds. It had happened the day of the market incident, He and Hokage-sama were speaking about the fracture in Naruto's leg when an animalistic scream had halted their talk. Naruto was arched off the bed, his hands gripping the sheets as his body twisted and turned in unknown pain. All they could do was watch as the red chakra batted against the walls, their own chakra shields and the furniture. Both men were certain Kyuubi was taking over the small boy, but when the blonde finally fell limp onto the bed once more, his body covered in sweat and his leg no longer swollen, it was still Naruto who looked up at them. The boy's chest heaved with each breath, his eyes looking at them as he moved a hand slowly to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Then, to both the Hokage and Iruka's surprise, Naruto slid off the bed and walked towards them, his eyes darting around for danger. He walked without the slightest limp, and from how he stood, this happened often, he wasn't even the slightest bit surprised. Iruka nodded, bringing his mind back to the present. Then go. Naruto stilled, not wanting it to really be true. Usually the Chunin refused to let him go out at night for fear of losing him again. Go? He whispered, nodding outside to where the moon and the hunt awaited him. Yes, go. But be back by midday. He cocked his head. Midday? High, when the sun is high in the sky, Iruka said, trying to make it easier for the fox to understand. Sun high. Naruto nodded and then without another word was out the door, and into the growing night. Iruka sighed and turned to look where Kakashi was sitting. From where he was, the lazy Jounin could have been sleeping, but Iruka knew better than that. The silver ninja was alert and watching everything around them, including Iruka. Any news? He asked as he walked towards him. Kakashi smiled. Sasuke's awake and still as grumpy as ever. Great, back to our dysfunctional family. Iruka groaned, a feral boy, a lazy Jounin, a dark and brooding boy, and me, the only sane one in the house. Don't be like that, Iruka. It hurts when you're mean. I'm just being truthful. He smirked, passing by to try and sleep. He worried too much about that boy. Naruto had survived years without the help of humans, but he couldn't help but worry. He finally got Naruto back and he didn't want to lose him again, not now, not ever. Kitsune took a deep breath and entered the woods, his real home, his air, his life. He couldn't live within those wooden walls, they were too small, and he couldn't smell everything like he could out here. This was where he belonged, not with people but with animals and in the forest. He looked up at the full moon between the towering branches and shed his clothes and shoes, leaving himself naked and ready for the hunt. He knelt upon the earth and sniffed the ground closely, blue eyes glittering as he looked around the dark forest for unsuspecting prey. The ground held the scents of hundreds of animals and humans alike, but his sensitized nose could pick between those for the most recent scent of prey and follow it. The scent of rabbit filled his senses, and he looked around once more before following the trail silently towards his prey. He could barely keep down his excitement about being able to finally join the hunt once more, that he had to force his muscles to relax and watch where he was stepping and how. The feel of decaying leaves, soft dirt, and pieces of stick beneath his feet, the slight breeze blowing through his now short hair, hands clenching and unclenching in excitement, and the night sounds gave him a sense of belonging stronger than the one he felt with his own kind. Yet he really didn't belong anywhere. Mating season did not apply to him, other foxes never approached him, and so for his entire life he could remember he had been left alone, though that really didn't bother him until he saw the humans. He didn't understand the importance of remember yesterday or thinking of tomorrow. He was a fox, and as a fox he must live, that was all that mattered. These humans confused him, and yet the ones he saw as his kind weren't his kind at all. He was accepted nowhere, and so lived alone, but he couldn't deny that he liked living with the three humans. Shaking away those thoughts, he focused once more on the hunt, his eyes probing the dark and searching for signs of movement. The rabbit smell became stronger, filling his being, and he finally crouched down a couple feet away from the rabbit's den. Very slowly he approached the den and sniffed the opening. There was more than one rabbit. Smiling ferally, Kitsune began scratching at the den, his claws sinking into the ground and ripping it away, exposing more of the den until it was mostly uncovered. He peered down into the hole and frowned in disappointment. 3 baby rabbits, and the mother was gone, probably out the other hole somewhere else. He lifted one of the baby rabbits, plump and meaty, but barely a challenge with its eyes still closed. Yet food was food, and when food was available, he took what he could when he could, never certain when his next meal may be. He quickly snapped their necks without a noise coming from the babies and then tore them open, eating the little meat available there. Blood covering his hands and lips, Naruto dropped the bodies back into the hole and covered them up, leaving them there for later. He huffed and lifted his nose to sniff the wind, wanting something more satisfying than a couple of baby rabbits. Smelling nothing, he took to running through the forest, searching and focusing upon the hunt and nothing else. Going through streams, meadows, forests, thickets, and swamps, he tracked, stalked, and finally came upon a prey he could be satisfied with. Gazing upon the nimble creature before him, Kitsune fell once more to a crouch and growled deep in his throat. Licking his chapped lips, he slowly crept towards the brown deer, his eyes narrowing and his muscles tensing with each step. His claws dug into the ground and he smirked when he was just a couple feet from the grazing deer. He took another step, freezing when the deer's ears tilted in his direction, straining for a sound, and watched from the brush as the deer took a step and continued grazing. Powering his hind legs, he snarled and leapt at the deer, his claws sinking into flesh. The deer startled and kicked out, but Kitsune was already on the creature's back, his fangs sinking into the deer's jugular. He swallowed the blood flowing into his mouth to keep breathing and tore at the deer's throat with his claws as the deer continued to struggle beneath his grasp. Keeping a firm grip on the deer, he waited until the struggling ceased and the great deer fell to its knees before him, dead. Naruto dropped his hands and released the deer, blood dripping from his mouth and down his chest. He yipped at his kill, the killing nature within him pleased with the hunt, and waited another couple minutes before finally tearing past the tough hide to the meat behind it. His claws sunk into the warm body, and the smell of blood filled his nostrils. Folding his legs beneath him, Naruto sunk to the ground beside the deer and feasted upon his kill, eating as much as he could and then dragging it somewhere that was somewhat hidden. He buried it as best he could before marking it as his own and leaving to find a suitable place to sleep. Stopping by a stream, he washed his hands and mouth as best he could to keep flies away as well as other predators and then set off to find a suitable tree or burrow to sleep in. Before he was taken here, he had his own burrow, a small cave that had been abandoned for years and was just right for him. Yet he was too far away from it now, and so he had to settle for something more open and rely on his senses to save him. After an hour searching, he finally found a suitable tree and climbed halfway up, his claws leaving deep gashes in the wood. He settled down onto a large branch on his stomach, his arms and legs hanging over the side, and yawned. A full stomach and a safe den was all a fox could want and hope for, and he had both. He couldn't snuggle into the tree as he did at home, and he shifted a couple times because the bark was rough against his spread legs, but he felt more at home than he had in many moons. He yawned once more, sleep overcoming him, and closed his eyes, the night sounds lulling him to sleep. Kakashi leaned back into his seat, his legs crossed and his arms crossed behind his head as he watched with his one eye as Sasuke glared at him. Ah, the wonders of having a charge with the mentality of a 40-year-old and the body of a 12-year-old. The boy was just too stiff, almost like he had a stick up his assum, but what kind of stick? Sasuke could tell just by the lazy look on his sensei's face that Kakashi was thinking something perverted. Being around the Jounin this long let him easily see what Kakashi was thinking, at least for the most part. "Where's Naruto?" he finally demanded. "Oh? You mean you're worried about our little fox?" Sasuke scowled, his face darkening dangerously, and Kakashi quickly put his hands up in defeat. "What's happened?" "Well, after we found you two in the forest, we brought you here, of course, and the medic Nin here were able to remove the poison from your system. But after that, you refused to wake up and we were left taking care of Naruto while you were sleeping. At this rate you aren't going to make it to the Chunin exams, Sasuke. You really should sleep less." "Like it was my choice. Kitsune is different." "Yup. 2 months has proven that Iruka really is a teacher. He's gotten Naruto to wear clothes, shoes, go by the name Naruto, and even understand the basics of Japanese and English. He's picking up on Japanese easier, and we think it's because he spoke it before he was lost, but he's still very carnivorous. We've gotten him to understand that we don't base respect upon strength. Well, part of it we do, but on age and wisdom, but he doesn't seem to like that idea very much. We've had a couple slips. He doesn't like crowds, fruit, surgery treats, anything that isn't water, especially sake. He hates enclosed spaces and would rather spend the night out in the rain than in his own bed. He gets these urges to go out in the middle of the night and disappears for days sometimes. He went out last night, but Iruka told him to be back by noon." "He understands?" "Not completely. Iruka told him to be back when the sun is high in the sky or something like that." Kakashi chuckled. "Unfortunately, he's picked up some undesirable language as well, some curse words, though he doesn't understand them, and team. He really seems to like that word." "What about ninjutsu?" The silver Jounin raised his eyebrows as mild surprise. "He can actually almost hold his own against Iruka. He has an amazing amount of stamina. His speed is almost inhuman for his age, and he holds his kunai as if they were extended claws." "Chakra?" "Ah, well, we're having a problem there. He doesn't understand the idea of drawing chakra from the body or how to use it. He actually seems hesitant to try it. I don't know if it's because of the Kyuubi or not, but usually if either of us bring it up, he becomes uninterested or shakes his head and walks away." "HN. But he'd make a great ninja if he knew how to utilize that chakra available to him. We're going to have a Hyuga come to your estate and look at Naruto's chakra ways. We don't know if the seal is inhibiting his regular chakra or not, but if it is, we'll have to see if Hokage-sama can reverse it without releasing the Kyuubi. And if Kyuubi is released? Kakashi didn't answer for a minute before his soft voice uttered, then Naruto will have to be destroyed. Neither said anything for a while, both lost in their own thoughts, and what they thought of the fox boy that had come barging into their lives. Everything had changed since Naruto had been found. Sasuke was given a family, Iruka was given back Naruto, and Kakashi was given a place. Before, Kakashi had just wandered. He always slept at an inn, on the ground, a friend's house, or at the most spend a month or two in an apartment. He had never really had a place he could call his own, but since Naruto came, he had been given that. He was now the guardian of Sasuke and lived with the stoic boy, and he couldn't deny he liked the feeling of it. Sasuke had lost his family at 8 years of age to his brother, Uchiha Itachi. His big brother he had always looked up to and wanted to be just like. He had trusted wholly in his Aniki and never once doubted him, that is until he came home to a home of dead corpses and blood. He had watched as his brother killed their parents, Sharingan activated and spinning, and found he couldn't do anything to help them, not a thing. Itachi had murdered them savagely, and then left him as the sole survivor, leaving him as their sole avenger. He had taken it upon himself at that age to avenge them and kill his brother, therefore leaving him as the true sole survivor. He had trained endlessly every day, becoming the best in his class and the #1 rookie of Konoha, a prodigy. Yet he had lived alone for the past 5 years, in a completely quiet and dead house, never a sound except for his, and always alone. 5 years of no laughter, no parties, no birthdays, no Christmas, no arguments, no singing, no conversation, and definitely no sleepovers. He became as cold as his brother, and as serious as a jounin. There were no such things as joking, hanging out friends, they were just in the way, they weren't needed and just a hindrance to his goal, but without them it made quite a lonely life. Then Naruto came in and suddenly he found his home filled with everything that was a hindrance, and yet he found he didn't mind it. He didn't mind Iruka's singing as he cooked, Kakashi's jokes, Naruto's odd nature, and he found even more that he felt more alive with them there since the Uchiha massacre. Then there was Iruka. The gentle chunin that was better as a teacher than a ninja because he liked to teach and liked children. He had lost Naruto when he was only 5, his charge that he had come to love and adore as a son, to the wild, and dealt with the loss in the only way he could, forget him. Yet he never could forget Naruto. He knew it was better to forget a son he never had than to grieve for him every day, but Naruto was hard to forget. The rambunctious child had wormed his way into his heart and left an impression on his soul even after years of being dead. Naruto had always been a hyperactive child with a strong spirit and a determination to prove everyone wrong. He had been hated, strongly, even at a tender age of 5, but he never let them see just how much they hurt him, only Iruka saw. He had held the small boy as he cried and cried, asking why he was hated, why no one played with him and called him a monster or demon. And all he could do was hold the blonde and rock him back and forth, as he cried himself to sleep because no one was to know what is in him. Then came the day he was told Naruto was leaving. A select group of ninjas had been appointed to watching Naruto and to take the blonde somewhere where he would be treated rightly, and no one would know about the Kyuubi. Just a small handful of jounin and chunin that were going to make a home elsewhere with the small blonde. These select shinobi had never minded what Naruto was and had seen the crying boy behind the mask. They came and took him away from Iruka, the last time he ever saw the blonde. Yet he now had another chance to have his son back along with another son, Sasuke. 2 sons, 2 strong, willful and future great ninjas that he could be proud of along with Kakashi. Kakashi sighed and finally got to what he needed to. What happened that night? We know you were attacked, but no one can understand how you two survived an attack by a snake like that, and even more, how Naruto came out completely unscathed. Sasuke looked out towards the window, pausing, and finally muttered, he changed. Changed? It was Kyuubi. Kyuubi? Kakashi demanded. Kyuubi rescued us. The snake attacked us and Naruto saved my life, he said grudgingly, and then turned to the snake. His claws were longer and sharper, those whisker marks were darker, and his canines were almost fangs. He paused again, refusing to look at Kakashi. At first I just thought it was weird, but Naruto's eyes had changed, they were red. Kakashi sighed and leaned back, so Kyuubi came out. I wasn't conscious long after, but when I saw his eyes again, they were blue and it looked like Naruto was in control again. But it was still Kyuubi who rescued you too, and it tells us why Naruto came out unharmed. Kyuubi is a natural and vicious killer, so he knew how to take care of the snake when Naruto didn't, but this is dangerous. Another said, and both shinobi turned to look at the Hokage. Kakashi stood and bowed his head respectfully to the old man, Hokage-sama. I had just come in to see how Sasuke was doing as well as question him about Naruto, but it seems one of my questions has already been answered. Sandaime turned to Sasuke and smiled. How do you feel? Better, he replied coolly. That's good to hear. Now I must ask Sasuke, do you feel in any way threatened or in danger with Naruto living in your home? It is true we want Naruto to return to us and we want to learn what exactly happened when he and the caravan was attacked, but your safety comes first and foremost. Naruto has been dead to us for 8 years. We no longer know him nor see him as the same boy he once was. So, has he attacked you in any way? Sasuke barely hid his anger and surprise at the Sandaime's words, but he answered curtly, no. Has he attacked Kakashi or Iruka? No. Has he shown any signs of losing control over Kyuubi? No. Do you feel threatened or in danger in your own home? Sasuke narrowed his eyes, no. The Hokage nodded, sighing, and turned to Kakashi. You know the rules, Hatake-san. If, for any reason, Naruto is seen as a threat or unstable, he is to be killed. Then he left, leaving the two of them alone. Kakashi stared curiously at Sasuke, but remained silent as Sasuke refused to answer to unsaid question. He smiled and patted his charge's head, much to Sasuke's annoyance. I'll head home and tell Iruka-sensei that Naruto is still going to live. He may not be saying anything, but he's been worrying over it for 2 months now. He lost Naruto once already. I don't think he could lose him again. Iruka stood at the door, his arms crossed, a scowl on his face and one foot tapping the ground angrily. Before him stood a smelly, bloody, happy, naked blonde boy who was looking up at him with large blue eyes, uncertain of what had made the ninja so irate. It was true Naruto had returned on time and that was all Iruka had told him to do, but he didn't think the blonde boy would return naked and with a half-eaten, dirty carcass of a deer in tow. He did not want that in the house. Drop it, he said, pointing at the deer. Naruto looked over his shoulder at the deer, and then looked back at Iruka in shock. What? He pointed at the deer. That stays outside. No, the blonde said immediately. Yes. No. Yes. His lips pressed tightly together, he repeated no. Iruka sighed. This was almost like when Naruto was 2, only difference was he was 13 now. He rubbed the bridge of his nose and leaned against the door frame and finally used his trump card. Sasuke will be mad if you bring that in. Mad? Angry. Naruto blinked. Angry, Iruka said, this time growling. I'm angry. Comprehension dawned on the blonde and grumpily he dropped the deer, already pouting. Hunt good, he whined. Seeing the blonde would be pouting all day, Iruka finally gave in and directed Naruto to take the deer around the back. He grabbed a rope and then tying it around the 2 hind legs of the deer, his nose wrinkling at the smell, and dragged the deer up into the air, knotting the rope around the trunk of the tree. Naruto watched with avid curiosity as Iruka hefted the deer carcass into the air and left it swinging in the air, its face staring down at him. Maybe the humans did have some things to offer good, he said, nodding his head once. Iruka clapped his hands and then turned to the boy before him. Bath. The blonde knew that word very well and his face immediately wrinkled with disgust. He didn't like baths, it washed away his scent and Iruka made him wash with a pink block that made him smell like flowers. He didn't like it. The Chunin almost laughed at the look on Naruto's face. He knew all too well that Naruto hated baths, but he was not going to have a smelly boy stinking up the entire house just because he didn't like it. Come on, Naruto. Putting his hand on the boy's shoulder, he steered them back towards the house and into the bathroom. Tell me about the hunt? He asked as he began filling the tub. Blue eyes lit up with excitement, and Naruto began to babble incoherently about the hunt, exaggerated hand motions and growls and yips coming from the boy. Iruka just nodded and watched, picking up what words he could and laughing inwardly at Naruto's antics. It was almost as he once was, except that then he wasn't speaking in complete gibberish, at least to human ears. Naruto was still talking when the bath was ready and Iruka didn't even give him a chance to retaliate as he pushed the unsuspecting and hyper-blonde into the bath, water splashing about and drenching both of them. Iruka, used to it, just sat down next to the bath and handed Naruto a washcloth and soap, expecting the blonde wash himself again. They had only successfully done this twice, but he was hoping for a third time. He sighed when the fox boy began to yowl and cry, but at least he didn't try to climb out of the tub this time. After a couple minutes, Iruka grabbed the soap and lathered the washcloth, once more handing it to the blonde and waiting patiently as Naruto stared at it. No getting out until you're clean, Iruka warned. Finally, a tanned hand reached out and grabbed the cloth, Naruto growling as he did so, and began to wash away the bark, grime, and blood from his skin. Iruka sat back and watched as Naruto sniffed the soap and watching with slight fascination as the soap washed his skin clean and filled the tub with a layer of bubbles. Once he was lathered, Iruka pushed him down until his neck was at the water and ran his hands over the lithe body, washing off the soap. Naruto bit his lip, as he always did, and tensed at being so close to the water's edge. He had seen enough animals killed by water, and going beneath the water meant he couldn't breathe. Iruka slowly helped Naruto sit back up and then grabbed the shampoo, harshly cleaning the blood and dirt out of his once blonde hair. Right now it was more of a light brown, and he didn't even want to think of what else was in his hair. Naruto growled lowly every time Iruka scraped too harshly at his scalp, but for the most part he just sat there with his arms crossed, his bottom lip jutted out in a pout, and his eyes closed in water up to his torso. Grabbing a cup, Iruka filled it up with clean water, the other water now murky, and tilted Naruto's head back slightly to pour the water through his hair. He repeated this 5 or 6 times until the soap was gone, and then took the washcloth and scrubbed at his face, grimacing at the dirt coming off. Once he was certain Naruto was as clean as he could get, Iruka helped the blonde boy stand and wrapped a towel around the shivering form. He dried him off as Naruto continued to whimper because of having to have a bath, and then told him to go dress in some clothes. Naruto came down a little later dressed correctly and stood before Iruka, waiting for the Chunin to inspect him, as they did every day, to make sure he dressed correctly. Iruka nodded appraisingly and smiled at the blonde who had correctly put on a baggy black shirt and a blue pair of lounge pants. "Good job," he said happily, Naruto smiling back at him before coming to look over his shoulder at what Iruka was cooking. "Hot," Iruka warned. Remembering the first time Naruto had reached out to taste the food, burning his hand and crying over it for an hour, even after the Kyuubi had healed his hand. The blonde nodded and retreated a couple steps. He had burned himself more than once, thinking if he approached it from a different way it wouldn't burn him. He quickly learned the stove was off limits and something for humans, not foxes. Light humming filled the house and Iruka sighed as the door shut and Kakashi entered the kitchen. 2 months and the silver jounin had finally begun using the door once a week. Dressed in his normal black and gray outfit, Kakashi smiled and waved. "Yo. I see Naruto's back," he said, patting Naruto on the head like he had done to Sasuke. Naruto scowled at the ninja and left to sit down at the table, waiting as Iruka finished whatever he was making. Kakashi looked over Iruka's shoulder, leaning a little closer than needed, and snagged a piece of meat to taste. "Kakashi!" Iruka scolded, hitting the silver jounin lightly on the forehead with a wooden ladle. "Wait until supper." Laughing, he nodded and backed away. Okay, but it's good." "What is it?" "Oh, Iruka said, blushing from the compliment, "just something I whipped up." "Well, you can whip me up anything anytime," he said, and Iruka knew he was grinning beneath that mask before he retreated to sit at the table with Naruto. Not answering, Iruka quickly turned away and finished dinner and set it out with rice. "Naruto, no hands," he said before picking up his chopsticks and eating his dinner. The blonde fox huffed, but picked up the fork, a lot easier than chopsticks, and trying the food, sniffing at it for spices before tasting it. With a nod, he set into eating his meal in record time as the other two ate slowly and enjoyed it. "So Kitsune," Kakashi said after a minute of silence while Naruto was still engrossed with his food, "how was the hunt?" Iruka groaned, "Don't ask him that." But Naruto had heard him and looked up, eyes sparkling with excitement once more. Iruka sighed and shook his head, watching every now and then as Naruto began his tale again about his hunt, leaving the silver jounin completely stumped in what he was saying except that it was a good hunt. Even when the sun began to set, they were still at the table, Naruto talking animatedly about his hunt and showing them how he crept along and leapt at the deer. Then he dragged Kakashi out to point up at the deer that he had killed and began once more about his hunt. Iruka laughed when Kakashi looked back at him, his expression begging for the Chunin to come save him from hearing all about the hunt again, but he just shook his head and began clearing the table. It was his own fault for asking. Kitsune, come out from there," Iruka demanded, waiting impatiently outside of the blonde youth's room. "Come out right now or no dinner." That made the boy move. Seconds later a disgruntled Naruto appeared before the door, wearing nothing but a loose pair of black boxers. Even the smallest pair was too small for his thin frame. Years of malnutrition and starvation had stunted his growth, as well as altered his form from filling out like it should. Though he had fat and he wasn't ever hungry like he once was, he never filled out, and his muscles stayed lean and slightly defined. With his arms crossed and a scowl on his face, Naruto made a face at his teacher, friend and guardian before huffing at him. "What?" he asked, his voice full of annoyance. Don't you take that tone with me, young man. Iruka scolded, making the blonde look down. We have guests who wish to meet you and you will be nice. Naruto frowned. Geese? Guests. Guests, he repeated. The older man smiled. Good job. What guests? People who don't live with us, but are here. The look of concentration of his face made him irresistibly cute, and Iruka couldn't help but smile softly as the blonde fox chewed on his bottom lip. Me not guests? He finally asked, his blue eyes looking up at Iruka. Right, you're not a guest. Who? Come downstairs and you'll see. Naruto nodded and then headed down the hall to the steps, but instead of going down like Iruka thought, the fox crouched on the ground and peeked around the side. With his advanced eyesight, he could see the two men standing in the living room, both looking rigid and ready to leave at a moment's notice, and sniffed the air hesitantly. Their scent was similar to each other, and he couldn't help but wonder why two related males were together. Then again, humans had such strange ways. The taller man is the head of the Hyuga household, Hyuga Hayashi, Iruka said, looking down at the blonde curiously. And the other, standing to his right, is Hyuga Niji, a genius by our standards. He frowned at the odd words he didn't comprehend, but remained silent as he studied them. He knew better than to make a sound when hunting and studying prey, but these prey were different. There was something wrong with their eyes, but from where he was he couldn't tell exactly what, and they were poised to attack even though they looked relaxed. Guests? He asked in a hushed voice. Yes. He harumphed and then disappeared down the stairs in a flash of speed, jumping over the railing and in front of the two men. He heard the whirl of a blade long before dodging it and landed on all fours in a ready crouch, growling. His right side of his lip was curled to show his fang, and his eyes remained focused on the two men while he growled low in his throat. Naruto watched closely as three more blades came towards him, his eyes taking in the motion, the curve and the speed of the weapons before his body sprang into action. He bent his body low to the floor, his forehead almost touching, and waited half a second for the first to pass over him before pushing off the floor and flipping back to dodge the second. He could hear the third just behind him and fell back into his crouch, his eyes focusing once more on the two Hyugas. Stop! Iruka yelled as Niji released another blade. The Chunin teacher caught it in one hand and stood in front of Naruto protectively. Niji-kun, I said stop. He's not dangerous, just startled. He came down here to inspect you, not fight you. Naruto looked at them from behind Iruka's legs, his anger and fear suddenly replaced by curiosity, and crept out slowly until he was crouched before the two men. His eyes widened when he saw the pupilless eyes staring back at him, and he looked back and forth between the men before hissing at them and retreating. What weird humans were these? He pointed at their eyes and said wrong to Iruka. No. Their eyes are like that, Naruto. Just like you have blue eyes and I have brown, the Hyuga family has white eyes. The blonde frowned, not understanding, but shrugged and walked away to look out the window. He took his normal place on the windowsill and said over his shoulder without looking at them, "When see Sasuke? We'll see him later today, but first I need you to come back over here, Naruto." Not liking that idea, Naruto stuck his bottom lip out and kept his back to them, a disrespectful movement in animal terms. Why? Because they need to check you. What? They need to look at you. Niji watched the odd banter between the two ninjas, if he could count that fucked up kid to his left as a ninja. Both he and his uncle were looking at the odd blonde, uncertain of what was wrong with him, and watched as Iruka tried to explain in simplistic terms what he needed. What was his name again? Naruto to do. A stray piece of hair tickled his eye, but he ignored it as best he could and continued to watch as Iruka approached the blonde cautiously. They had been called over here to look at a ninja's chakra, though no other information had been gathered, and he concluded the ninja had to be the boy before him. From the first moment he saw him, he knew there was something wrong with him, but he had yet to look at his chakra. But there was something bothering him about this boy. He had first thought the blonde had been an intruder and immediately reacted, throwing shuriken and kunai at the intruder without pause, but without the least bit of chakra. The blonde had dodged all his attacks gracefully and perfectly. He didn't touch a single blade, didn't block in any way, and yet he was still able to dodge them all. Niji searched his mind, but the only blonde he knew was that annoying Sasuke fangirl Ino. There was no other blonde in the village unless they had been hiding Naruto, but what reason would they have for that? Naruto! Iruka growled, standing a foot away from the blonde with his hands crossed over his chest. I said they want to look at you. I know you understand me, and so if you don't get your ass moving, I will personally do it for you. The last thing Niji was expecting Naruto to say was, "What ass?" The Chunin groaned exhaustedly, and raked his hair back. Just let them look at you. Harumphing again, Naruto stalked back over to where the Hyuga continued to stand and sunk to his feet before them, glaring at them. Look, he said, his voice rough. His uncle nodded and breathed deep before saying, Byakugan. The blonde fox jumped back at the sudden burst of chakra and hissed, falling into his defense crouch and watching the two Hyugas warily. Niji said in an odd whisper. The younger Hyuga immediately activated his blood limit, looking deep into the eyes of the blonde before him. Uncle, what is this? He whispered, looking at the conflicting chakra coursing through the blonde. 2 chakra systems? This is impossible. The older Hyuga looked up and down Naruto's system, trying to understand what he saw there. It seems that the main chakra has been trapped or blocked by something while that alien chakra stems from his abdomen. Iruka-sensei? The Chunin sighed and looked down at Naruto with a soft smile. This is Uzumaki Naruto. I thought he was killed, the older Hyuga exclaimed. News reached us that Uzumaki Naruto and the others had been ambushed, and there were no survivors. There was one. Iruka looked at Niji and then Naruto before saying, Niji-kun, do you mind watching Naruto for an hour or so while your uncle and I talk? I serve the main house. If it is asked of me, I shall. Niji said quietly before approaching the blonde boy, his eyes still taking note of his chakra system. Don't take your eyes off of him, Niji-kun. He'll slip out of your sight if you do, even for a second, he warned. And Kitsune, you listen to Niji, he added, pointing to the Hyuga. Snorting, the younger Hyuga crossed his arms and muttered, Come on, Uzumaki. Naruto frowned and looked to Iruka. Uzumaki? Uzumaki. That's your last name, Naruto. What? Uzumaki Naruto is your whole name. He didn't completely understand, but just said, oh, and stood to follow Niji. Be good. Iruka warned, but he already knew there were going to be problems by the way Naruto was grinning. Immediately when the fresh wind and sun hit his face, Naruto stretched and looked up at the sun, an honest grin on his face. He loved these days when the sun shined and the wind carried the scent of many prey. It was days like these he spent lazing around beneath tree branches and lightly hunting until sunset. Looking at his new companion, the blonde studied him curiously. The young man wore a tan short-sleeved shirt and black shorts and blue shoes. His right leg was wrapped in those white weird things Silver Moon put on him when he fell through the window. What did Scarred Nose call him again? Bandages? Bandages? Bandages. His blue eyes looked closely at the leg. Maybe he had injured himself? But he didn't smell blood on him, or at least coming from the leg, nor did he smell the staunch scent of decaying flesh. Naruto shrugged and continued his observation. He wore that same metal and cloth thing across his head as Scarred Nose, Silver Moon, and even Ravenhair wore, but there were humans that didn't wear them either, and he didn't completely understand why some did and some didn't. He had thought upon this before and decided that it had to be because their sense of smell was so dull they had to have something else tell them apart, and so they wore those metal cloth things. Moving closer, the blonde fox crept around Niji, who was watching him with those weird eyes, and sniffed the pack tied around his waist and settled on the back of his left hip. He began to reach towards it to see what it was when Niji spun around and grabbed his wrist, his eyes narrowed and a scowl on his face. What are you doing? Growling, Naruto tore his hand away and glared back at him. Team. Niji snorted and turned away. What an idiot. He muttered before turning back to question the blonde, but instead of bright, curious blue eyes, he was met with an empty field. Shit. Iruka wasn't exaggerating when he said not to take his eyes off the blonde. He disappears so silently and quickly that he'd make a great thief or even assassin. He scanned the field and surrounding trees once before activating his blood line again and searching for the 2 chakras. He located it almost a half-mile away into the woods and took after it. There was no way he was letting him out of his sight again. Taking to the trees, Niji kept a constant lock on Naruto's chakra using the Byakugan as a beacon, but it still took him a good half hour to catch up with Naruto's increasing pace. Who the hell was this boy? He could dodge and sense objects without the slightest hint of chakra. He could run like the wind without strengthening his legs with chakra, and within him lay not one but 2 separate chakras. Niji wasn't surprised when he found Naruto waiting for him beside a stream. The blonde fox was crouched before a stream, staring into the clear water, and cocking his head at something there. He glanced over his shoulder once at Niji, and then returned to stare at the stream, a frown on his face and curiosity in his eyes. Niji came closer slowly and peeked over Naruto's shoulder, staring down at what he had found. Mine, Naruto said immediately before Niji could even see what it was. He had found it, and so it was his and no one was going to take it away from him. Niji reached over him and pulled out the headband lying in the stream. From the looks of it, it wasn't very old and barely had any scratches on it. The Konoha symbol was etched on the front and the blue fabric wasn't even ripped, so someone must have forgotten it on purpose or disposed of it for some reason. Mine, Naruto said again, reaching for it. No, you're not a ninja. The blonde stuck his bottom lip out in a pout and huffed. I find mine. This is earned, not found, Niji said sternly. This shows you are now more than a citizen of Konoha, one destined to protect it and its people as well as the Hokage. It is only given to those who deserve and have strived for it, not to someone like you. Naruto didn't understand half of what Niji had said, but he did get the point. It wasn't his. And he didn't like that outcome. Mine! 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 He screamed, no yours, mine! I find mine! Give! He demanded, holding out his hand. Iruka had been teaching him not just to take things he wanted, but to ask for it first, something unknown to foxes. No. The growl that came from his throat sounded anything but human, and Niji could have sworn that those weird whisker marks had darkened. The Hyuga tensed at the sudden chakra surrounding the blonde and leapt back when Naruto disappeared from his sight. What the fuck? He whispered, searching for any signs of the blonde around him. A crack of a twig alerted him just in time to dodge Naruto as he came from his left side, so fast that Niji could barely see him. Readying himself with 4 kunai, Niji stilled again and listened for any signs from the blonde. Byakugin. Looking around with new eyes, he could see the pulse of chakra coming from Naruto, and dodged him once more, but the blonde was becoming too fast. Even if he could see the chakra, it moved too quickly for him to pinpoint and counterattack it. Mine! A guttural voice yelled. Niji turned and gasped quietly at the claws just inches away from him. He put his hands up to block him and closed his eyes, waiting for the impact that never came. Instead, he felt hands wrap around his torso and pull him away, those claws ripping into the tree that was just feet behind him. The young Hyuga opened his eyes and looked up at Kakashi, the older ninja staring at Naruto. The blonde was panting heavily, his body covered in sweat as if he'd been training for hours, though it had only been a couple minutes. Crouched on the ground, Niji could see he was struggling to stand up, and he kept shaking his head and growling as if talking to someone. Kitsune, Kakashi said softly, and the blonde stilled. Calm down. He wants out, Naruto whispered, finally looking up at them with blue eyes despite his elongated claws and fangs. Who? Niji asked, uncertain if the boy was stable or not. Kyuubi. Iruka-san, why is that monster back here? The older Hyuga immediately demanded. He's not a monster, he's just a child who's been lost to us. That thing is not Naruto, it's something else, and we can't have something like that endangering our village, our children. Iruka sighed. I know why you're worried and I understand it, but Naruto survived that ambush and Sasuke found him in the woods over 2 months ago. He's learning quickly and he'd make a great ninja. Ninja? You can't be a ninja if you aren't even human, Iruka-san. Naruto is human, but you're not here to discuss Naruto's mental state. Hiashi-sama, Hokage-sama has already looked into that. What we need you for is to know about the 2 chakra systems he has. Naruto refuses to use his chakra and balks at the idea of it. Does the Kyuubi block his own chakra or in any way affect it? Of course it does. Kyuubi's chakra is stronger and different from our own, and it's been placed inside that boy and locked away, but that doesn't mean he can't tap into that power. His own chakra is erratic because of the stronger one trying to dominate his body, and looking at his chakra gates, it seems while barely any chakra is freely flowing through his body, more than half is the Kyuubi's own chakra, which is suffocating Naruto's. Then how do we stop that? The seal had to have changed. I don't know when or how, but I'd be certain that the seal has changed since it was created. I still remember it from when he was just a small child, but he could use his chakra then without any problems, and Kyuubi's chakra remained locked. You'll have to fix it so Kyuubi's chakra will only be used when Naruto wants it to be used, but how to do that is beyond me, Iruka-san. The Hyuga stood up and shook his head. You've endangered yourself and others by bringing that boy back here. He was better off dead and forgotten. Naruto never should have been sent away in the first place, Hyuga-sama. He is where he belongs once more, here with us. He sighed and shook his head. Just remember this, that boy is just a shadow of the one you loved and nothing more. Kyuubi? Niji whispered, as in Kyuubi Kitsune, the one that the 4th Hokage died destroying? Kakashi gave that lazy eye smile and clasped his hand on Niji's shoulder. Yup. So now you know, and you're not going to tell anyone, right? The Hyuga didn't even respond, Instead, he kept his eyes trained on Naruto, who was still fighting against the fox demon. The blonde dug his hands into the ground and growled deep in his throat, warning the fox to back off. His claws shrank back into nails and his canines slowly disappeared back into his mouth as the whisker marks became just small scars once more, but the blonde continued to growl. Naruto pushed himself off the ground, his head hung low, and grabbed the closest tree to steady himself. Niji's eyes widened at the moving mark on his stomach. The spiral moved slowly as the 4 elephants at each corner glowed as if forcing the spiral into submission. He watched as the seals slowly began to disappear, the black ink sinking into his skin and leaving not even a scar behind, and looked into the blonde's eyes to find them clear and weary. Be thankful you didn't meet Kyuubi, Niji. He's not one you want to meet, Kakashi said before crossing the distance between the blonde and himself. Naruto looked up at him curiously and didn't complain when the Jounin picked him up and cradled him to his chest. Kakashi straightened, Naruto secure within his arms, and looked at Niji once before turning to return to the Uchiha mansion. The Hyuga remained still as the 2 of them disappeared into the trees, his hand still clenching tightly to the headband that he had all but forgotten. He lifted the limp object higher to see and then turned his head back to where the blonde had stood. 4 deep and jagged claw marks lay engraved in the tree, the remnants of that chakra still visible, and reminding him just how close he had come to death. Who was this boy? Uzumaki Naruto, human, fox, demon, child, where did one such as he belong in this world? Uchiha-san! You open this door right now, the nurse demanded from outside Sasuke's room, annoyance prominent in her voice. Fuck no, he muttered as he pulled his shirt over his head and slipped his arms inside the sleeves. 2 weeks was well beyond the time he needed to recover, and there was no fucking way he was going to stay here another night. Having the constant visits from those fangirls of his, the nurses and doctors fawning over him all day and night, and then therapy sessions that barely strengthened his little toe were driving him slowly to insanity. The only difference in his days was Naruto and Kakashi's random visits. Thinking about the blonde, Sasuke wondered why he hadn't seen him lately. When he first awakened, Naruto was there almost every day, even if only for a couple minutes, and now a week later he had barely seen him twice. If you don't open this door in 10 seconds, Uchiha-san, I'll call for a shinobi to do it for me, she threatened, typical civilian. Go ahead and send them, I'll be gone by that time, he said before throwing the window open and slipping onto the roof. Breathing deep of the cool evening air, he closed his eyes momentarily before slipping down the shadow of the roof and jumping to the next. Time to go home. Kakashi held Naruto against his chest, just as he had done months ago when they almost lost Sasuke, and slipped through the bedroom window. He laid Naruto down on Sasuke's bed, the blonde fox refused to sleep elsewhere, and paused as he covered the exhausted boy with a blanket. Brushing back his blonde spikes, Kakashi couldn't believe how attached he had become to the fox in such a short amount of time. He had refused to ever become attached to anyone that could be used against him ever again. But even though he had said that and meant it with all his heart, he now had 4 people he cared deeply for. Shaking those thoughts from his head, the Silver Nin silently slipped from the room and made his way downstairs where Iruka sat on the couch, his face hidden in his hands. Kakashi frowned at the usually flustered Chunin looking so deep in thought, and slowly came to stand before him. Iruka-san? Iruka startled at the soft voice and looked up into a gray eye. Hataki-kun. Well, don't be too enthusiastic about seeing me, he muttered. I'm sorry. I just Hyuga-san said some things about Naruto an. Let me guess, said something insensitive and completely off basis that has you thinking he might be right. But he is right, Hataki-kun. Kakashi, he interrupted. Kakashi, not Hataki-kun, but Kakashi, Iruka-san. Flushing, Iruka nodded and repeated, he is right, Kakashi-kun, the Naruto we have now isn't my Naruto. That fox up there is Kitsune, not Naruto. He's lived the past couple years completely alone except for maybe the occasional human passing by, but we both know how quietly he walks. Even an Umbu would have trouble hearing, or even finding him. He blends into the shadows and sneaks away just like a fox, and he may eat like one and act like one, but he's still a boy, Iruka-san. He's just a 13-year-old boy who knows nothing else except how to survive. But he isn't my little boy anymore. So that makes him unreal? That makes him dead? Iruka hid his face in his hands and shook his head vigorously. No. I love Kitsune, just as much as I love Naruto, but when I look at that face and those eyes, I want to believe he is Naruto, my Naruto, and that he came back to me. He won't come back, Iruka-san, he can't, Kakashi whispered before standing up and leaving the compound. The Hokage needed to know about Naruto's sudden change in Kyuubi's slight control, as well as what he learned from Iruka's conversation earlier. He wasn't a retired Umbu for nothing, right? Kitsune blinked his eyes, slowly sitting up in the bed and quickly scanning his surroundings for any predators. After a moment of silence, he, slightly, relaxed his body and slipped from the soft bed, curious to know when he had climbed into the bed in the first place. He huffed as he tried to recall what had happened, but all he came up with was a sickening feeling in his stomach and that weird human with no eyes. He couldn't understand how they saw without eyes, but he didn't know how to ask that yet. Standing, the blonde fox glided soundlessly across the floor and into the hall. He once more scanned his surroundings before continuing through the house, frowning as Scarnose didn't appear before him. Every time he woke up, Scarnose was there within a couple minutes at least, but not this time. This time the entire house was quiet and no one was here. A small wave of panic enveloped him. He had felt this before. Flashback. Iruka and Ai-san. Naruto practically yelled as he tumbled into the house. Iruka and Ai-san, guess what? I made a friend. But only silence answered him. The blonde frowned at the empty house. He had never come home to an empty house. Iruka made certain of that. Nissan? He whispered, blue eyes searching for his only family. Dropping his books, the 5-year-old boy ran through the house, trying to find the one person who he truly mattered to, but the older Nin was nowhere in sight. Where are you? He screamed, tears beginning to track down his face. Nissan! Where'd you go? Naruto fell to the ground in a crying heap. Sobs filled the silent room as the pain in his heart grew. Iruka had left him, just like everyone else, and now he was all alone, completely and utterly alone again. He had spent the first 2 years of his life alone, not knowing kindness or even love until he met Iruka, and when the young Chunin had taken him beneath his wing, he learned what love was. It had taken months to get Naruto to where he was now and to actually trust him and understand why he was being nice. He had thought it was because Iruka cared for him. Had he just done this so the betrayal would be graver? So it would be more damaging than if he'd never known kindness. But why would his Ai-san do this to him after so many years without ever showing him anger or contempt? Curling into a ball, Naruto hugged his knees and cried harder, barely whispering Nissan again and again. He wanted someone to love him, to want him, to care for him, to worry about him, and to be with him. He never wanted to be alone again, never, never, never. Warm arms scooped Naruto up and pulled him against a hard chest. Naruto? What's wrong? Iruka asked. Did you get hurt? Did someone hurt you? Naruto-chan, what happened? Blurry-eyed, Naruto looked up at Iruka's concerned expression before wrapping his arms around the older man's neck and holding him tight. Nissan! He cried as Iruka began rubbing his back soothingly. Carrying him to the couch, Iruka sat down wearily and held the blonde close, silently wondering what had happened. He crooned to the boy and continued to rub his back as he rocked back and forth, Naruto holding onto him as if he were his lifeline. He waited until the tears subsided and Naruto relaxed in his arms before asking, what happened? I thought you left me, he sniffled. You weren't here when I got home. Tightening his grip on him, Iruka kissed his tanned forehead. I'm never going to leave you, Naruto-chan, because we're family and I love you. Cerulean eyes looked up, full of disconcert. Really? He whispered. Really? End of flashback. He had grown attached to these humans in the past couple months. He didn't want to be alone anymore, at least not all the time, but he liked them and didn't want them to leave him. Kitsune knew he was not Fox, but nor was he human, he just was. Falling into a crouched position, Kitsune let out a terrible yowl, one like a kit would make when his mother went hunting, and cried for someone to come. He wanted someone to come back for him. He didn't want to be left alone again. He'd admit these humans were strange in their ways, but he didn't like this feeling within him. Kitsune didn't understand what it was, but he knew he didn't like it and wanted someone to make it go away. Naruto! What's wrong? Iruka yelled, racing up the walkway and bursting through the door. He had stepped outside with Kakashi for a couple minutes to talk about what Niji and his uncle had said, and after the Silver Nin had left, he found himself just standing there reminiscing. It was true that Naruto had changed, but it didn't change the fact that Kitsune was still Naruto or that he loved him any less. They were both his blonde bundle of energy he looked upon as a son. The yowling stopped immediately as Kitsune launched himself at Iruka and held on tight, burying his face into Iruka's chest. Nissan, he said roughly. Iruka gasped at the words he hadn't heard in 8 years and yearned to hear once more. He wrapped his arms around Kitsune's shoulders and pulled the blonde fox closer. What's wrong? You gone no here. Oh, Naruto-chan, I was outside, that's all. Those same cerulean eyes looked up at him, uncertainty filling his irises as he gnawed on his bottom lip. The silent question reflecting in those eyes came easily to Iruka. I'll never leave you. You'll never have to worry about that. Iruka-san? a cool voice said from behind them, and the two turned to look at Sasuke standing in the doorframe. Sasuke-kun, what are you doing here? Iruka asked, surprised to see the shinobi standing there. Kitsune tore away from Iruka and tackled Ravenhair to the ground, grinning madly down at the stoic boy. Sasuke! He then titled his head and said, back? Hi, now get off. He growled before shoving the blonde off him. Slowly pushing back to his feet, Sasuke glared at the now cowering fox and finally turned back to Iruka. I left the hospital. Why? The sudden change in the Chunin's voice took Sasuke by surprise and he found himself staring into angered eyes. Because it was useless. That's not good enough, young man. You don't need to know anything else except that I have left, he said vehemently before disappearing from sight. Sasuke! Iruka yelled as he dashed outside, but the young shinobi was already gone without a trace. Kitsune tilted his head and frowned, uncertain of what exactly transpired between the two humans. He knew from the raised voices and the sudden change of inflections in their voices it was something of a dominant struggle, but why Ravenhair suddenly fled made no sense. He looked at Scarnose for answers, but the man seemed unable to answer them himself. Turning, Scarnose sighed and shook his head. I have to inform Kakashi-san, okay? I promise I'm not leaving you, but we have to find Sasuke before it gets too dark. Sasuke gone? He asked curiously. Yes, Sasuke's gone, Iruka whispered before disappearing to find Kakashi. Kitsune jumped back and yelped, teeth bared to attack at Scarnose's sudden disappearance, but there was no one to attack. Slowly the blonde fox stood and whirled around, looking around for his guardian, but finding nothing except his scent. Sasuke gone? He asked again to the empty house. Find Sasuke. Slowly the blonde fox crept out of the house. He knew it was against Scarnose to leave the den without another with him, but he wanted to help. Ravenhair was finally back and Kitsune wanted to play with him. He'd been waiting so long for his den mate to awaken and come back. He still didn't understand why Ravenhair decided to sleep so long though. Kitsune paused just outside the door, closing his eyes and listening carefully to the sounds around him. His lips twitched slightly as he tilted his head towards the running water of a stream. To his left he could hear the angry screams of a hawk and behind him he heard the noisy drawing of carts and feet padding along the cobble roads of Konoha. Yet none of this helped him find Ravenhair, all it did was impede his acute sense of hearing. He crouched low to the ground, fingers hovering just over the grass and sniffed the ground, his nose singling out Ravenhair's smell within seconds. He slept in the human's bed every night, he had become accustomed to the smell and knew he could recognize it anywhere now. With a burst of speed Kitsune crossed the distance between him and his den mate, following the scent beyond rock, wood and stream and finally to a clearing several miles away. He paused just outside of the clearing and tilted his head curiously at the large round clearing before him. No grass, no rock, no tree, no plant and no sign of wildlife were present, and from the smell of it, hadn't been in a long time. Kitsune took a hesitant step into the clearing, crawling on all fours slowly as if expecting a trap, and continued to look around him with wide blue eyes. He didn't like this place. Something about this place was wrong. It didn't feel right and made him uneasy as he continued to slowly make his way through it. Large black slabs of stone came from the ground, polished so much that the setting sun brightly reflected off of them, blinding whoever looked directly at them. Burned posts of wood barely stood several yards away from him, and he could almost see what looked like the floors in Ravenhair's den. Kitsune shifted to the right, trying to keep his nerve in this place, and spun around at a sound, but there was nothing there. Growling at himself for acting like a newborn kid, Kitsune willed himself to calm down and continued through the stones with avid curiosity and fear. What are you doing here? A rough voice growled and the blonde fox whirled around to look into deep, angry ebony eyes. Find Sasuke, he answered edgily, uncertain of why Ravenhair seemed so at peace in such a place. Well, go away. Kitsune narrowed his eyes and stood. No. I don't want you here, Sasuke hissed. Sasuke leave and Kitsune leave? No, you leave. Sasuke leave, Kitsune said firmly, crossing his arms over his chest as if to illustrate he wasn't leaving without the ebony nin. Just leave me alone. Why? I want to be alone. Kitsune frowned. True, as a fox he was a loner, but there were times when he didn't want to be alone, where he wanted a mate, a brother or sister or even a mother. He didn't understand why Ravenhair wanted to be alone when he had been sleeping for so long. Why? Because I fucking want to be, he raged, making the fox scurry away in surprise and fear. Kitsune sunk to his knees before his superior and tried to appeal to the raven-haired boy, hoping his show of respect would quell the older boy's anger. Want to stay with Sasuke? The fox said quietly, keeping his eyes bent to the ground. While spending time with the humans, Kitsune had learned many things about them, and one was the importance of eye contact. Something in his world was only made when trying to establish dominance. Eye contact with humans was just courteous. Scarnose hated it when he dropped his gaze or looked elsewhere. But now was not a time to test Ravenhair's patience, and submission was the best way to stay alive unless there was no other alternative. Fine. Stay, Sasuke snapped, see what I care. Yet deep in his heart, he was silently thankful the blonde didn't want to leave him, that someone was willing to stand beside him despite his demeanor. Kitsune happily followed Ravenhair through the odd-looking stones, his earlier uneasiness forgotten, and finally fell to his haunches at a stream's edge. Seeing the cool water, the fox licked his chapped lips thirstily and began to dip down to drink his fill, but stopped. His expression turned from simple bliss to confusion as his eyes scanned the water. Nothing grew in this stream and no fish were visible. What stream held no life? You've noticed then, Ravenhair said coolly, staring at his reflection in the innocently looking water. It's poison, cursed deadly. What? Kitsune asked. He knew none of these words. He sighed and simplified it. Bad, the water's bad. This he understood, and at hearing the words, the blonde fox scurried away from the stream's edge and kept his distance. He had known from the first step he had taken into this place that there was something wrong with it, and the water only confirmed it, yet he still didn't understand exactly what it was that made him so uneasy. Do you know what this place is, Naruto? Ravenhair asked quietly, his voice smooth and yet somehow holding a serious tone he had never heard before. He pondered the words, taking the time to sort out the words, and finally said, No. Obsidian eyes fell on Cerulean. Can you not see them? Can you not hear their screams in the dead of night? Their voices calling for you? Their faces pale and bloody haunting your dreams? Can you not smell their blood? Can you not see it smeared on your hands and seeping into your skin? Can you see it, Naruto? Kitsune suddenly hissed, every hair on his body upright and every muscle tense and waiting. He didn't understand everything Ravenhair had said, but he did know why this place was so unnerving. It reeked of death, and not just the death of prey or even the death that comes with old age. This was death that hung deep in the air, lingering and poisoning the land. He couldn't suppress the shiver that ran down his spine and looked up into haunted eyes. Ravenhair stared palm up at his hands, his breathing slightly quicker than it was a moment ago. 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago to this day, that he did this. I swore I'd kill him, avenge my family and clan by killing he who betrayed us all, Itachi. He said the name with such loathing that Kitsune looked away from those hateful eyes. He killed all of them except me, making me the avenger, a mission that if I fail then my family shall never know vengeance, and this place will never bear life. This is my clan, he said, turning around to look at the numerous tombstones, each with their names and family emblem engraved into the black stone. This is where they died. Kitsune didn't know what to do. Death was not something one lingered on in the animal world. Avoiding it, yes, mourning it, yes, but to remember it past 4 moons? It didn't affect him in such a way as it did Ravenhair. Human emotions were weird. Not many people know where this place is. The Uchiha compound is so isolated from the town that only a couple people actually knew that the mansion standing today is not the one I spent my life in. We burned the house, along with everyone in it, and then I placed these markers up, a reminder to what my life is and why. Not know, Kitsune said, frowning deeply. No, understand. I know, he smirked, that's why I'm telling you this. With that statement, the blonde fox confirmed humans made absolutely no sense. Come on, let's head back, Ravenhair whispered before shoving his hands into his pockets and walking away, his head tipped towards the ground and his eyes focused on the soot-sprinkled sand. Happy to get away from the deep aura of death, Kitsune quickly followed and stayed close to Ravenhair all the way back to the den. Sasuke sat on the couch with Naruto beside him, acting as if 2 extremely pissed off shinobi weren't glaring at them. The dark genin crossed his arms over his chest and slouched into his seat, glaring a hole through the floor. What the hell did you 2 think you were doing? Iruka finally said after a 10-minute silence. First, you Sasuke, leave the hospital against doctor's orders and then you disappear for 2 hours. I leave for 5 fucking minutes and come back to find Naruto gone as well. My, you really are mad if you're cussing Iruka-san. And you? The Chunin said, pointing at Kakashi, where the fuck were you? I've been here for 2 hours trying to get a hold of you to tell you that we're gone, and you decide to finally show up 10 minutes before they get here. If we're done here, Sasuke said, starting to stand up. We are not done, Iruka raged, effectively making Naruto sink down into the couch and Sasuke sit once more. Now we are going to set some rules, and Sasuke, I expect you to help Naruto understand what he can't. HN. Now then, curfew is at 9 p.m. If you're not in the house by then, you'll be punished accordingly. I expect both of you up by 6 a.m. and your beds made and rooms cleaned before you come down for breakfast. Sasuke, you'll be helping Naruto with that. Supper will be served at 7 unless otherwise said, and we will eat as a family despite our differences. Kakashi, you are to abide by these rules as well. You had better start answering your cell phone from now, or I will drag you home from wherever you are. But 6 is so early. The silver Jounin whined. Do I look like I care? Naruto, no leaving the house without one of us. The blonde fox pouted and crossed his arms, but didn't say anything. Now then, chores will be given out as well. A new chore list will be made every week by me and I expect you all to help out with them. I understand that there'll be missions and such, but when there are no missions, I expect the household to be run by this. This is my house, Sasuke began again. And you are my responsibility, Sasuke, and you now have people who need to know where you are in case something happens. This is what families do for each other, he sighed. I want to know where you are so I'm not worrying about what happened to you. I have no family, he whispered angrily before running up the stairs to his room and slamming the door. It had been so long since he had shown any emotion at all, though anger was the one he felt the most now, but still he never showed emotion, so why was he now? Naruto jumped up to follow his friend, but Iruka laid a hand on his shoulder. No, Naruto, let him be. Why? Because Sasuke needs to think about some things. He needs to be alone. The Chunin smiled down at the blonde and then let his frame fall wearily. I'll go get dinner ready, he said, moving towards the kitchen. Rest, Iruka-san, I'll get something from order out, Kakashi said before disappearing and making Naruto yelp again in surprise. Wide blue eyes looked around for the silver Nin, and he even looked under the couch before stalking through the house for Kakashi. Iruka smirked at Naruto's innocent antics and fell back on the couch, sighing as he closed his eyes. Yet his rest was cut short by a knock on the door, well, more like a bang on the door. Standing, Iruka crossed the room with Naruto right on his heels and opened the large white door. Iruka-sensei. Sasuke-kun's gone from the hospital, is he here? Is he okay? What happened? Why isn't he there? Did something happen that I should know about? A pink-haired girl asked, her green eyes full of worry. Don't worry, Sakura-chan, he's here and in his room. He decided to come back home. Naruto looked underneath Iruka's arm, still dressed in nothing except his lounge pants, and up at the human before him. Sniffing the air, he wrinkled his nose at the strong smell coming from it. Blinking, Sakura looked at the blonde boy and pointed down at him, and who's he? Deep blue eyes blinked childishly at the young teen. His mussed, spiky hair was a rich sun-kissed blonde, that if properly cared for would be stunning, and his skin was a perfect shade of tan that any girl would die to have. The boy, around her age from his looks, slowly stood and Sakura blushed as his arms fell to his side, exposing his naked chest. She lowered her eyes only to bring them back up as the lounge pants began slipping lower on his slim hips. She stuttered, glancing furiously from his face to his feet that were barefoot. Who's this, Iruka-sensei? Kitsune slowly stood, curiously looking at the creature before him. It looked human, it had 2 arms and 2 legs, but anyone could obviously tell something was wrong with it. For beginners, its fur was one piece that started above the knee and ended at its shoulders. It then split up the sides and its legs suddenly turned black beneath it, making Kitsune shudder at the sight. The deep red fur reminded him of blood and her green eyes were of a color he had never seen before. This creature surely wasn't human then with eyes like that. Slowly traveling upward, he took in the protruding lumps on her chest and her atrocious pink hair that matched her claws perfectly.